So the building is open about 20 hours a day, being used.
Good morning. Executive Director Radu, would you please read the roll?
Regent Bailing.
Present.
Regent Bradley.
Here.
Regent Evers. Regent Farrell. Here. Regent Grebe.
Here.
Regent Hall.
Here.
Regent Harsey.
Here.
Regent Langness.
Here.
Regent Manydeeds.
Here.
Sorry, Regent Higgins.
Here.
Regent Milner.
Here.
Regent Mueller. Regent Peterson.
Here.
Regent Pruitt.
Here.
Regent Tyler.
Here.
Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Whitburn.
Here.
Thank you. The minutes of the October 8-9, 2015 Board of Regents meeting have been provided. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have the reports of the Hospital Authority Board, the Higher Education Aids Board, and Wisconsin Technical College System Board. They've been provided to you. Now, are there any questions or comments regarding these reports? Well, hearing none, thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge and welcome the students and other members who are here, and some of the students and other members that are going to be coming later. They will be joining us to share their ideas and concerns about raising awareness on a variety of important issues, both in the UW system and beyond. The UW system and this board have long been committed to improving diversity and enhancing the college experience for all of our students, faculty, and staff. We still have work to do, yes, but we are doing that work. Our chancellors on each of our campuses are actively engaged in conversations and actions related to these issues, and that dialogue will continue. In the 3.5 years since I joined the board, I've had the opportunity to visit with students across the system, both individually and in groups, small groups and large groups. In the coming weeks, I and my colleagues and President Cross expect to continue meeting with students to engage and hear firsthand. As institutions of learning, the exploration and exchange of ideas are fundamental to our mission. Just yesterday, our Education Committee considered a resolution regarding academic freedom and freedom of expression, which we will be discussing later this morning. There is a positive and ongoing dialogue to be had on this topic. We will engage in that dialogue. But we have a full agenda today and many other matters that will draw our attention, both in work and actually in pleasure as well, as we have an opportunity to reflect back to the beginning of the system. We're going to be talking about debt. We're going to be talking about tuition differential at UW-Stevens Point, and a changed mission statement for the extension, just to name a few. So let's get started with a couple of updates. First, the 10-year policy task force held its third meeting on November 30th. This meeting was focused on reviewing a series of draft recommendations that were developed based on discussions the task force had during the previous 3 meetings. I'm going to ask Vice President Bailey, who chairs the task force, to provide us with a brief overview.
Good morning, everyone, and just a quick update. As the President mentioned, the 10-year task force has met 3 times, and our perhaps final meeting will be in 2 weeks. We've also had numerous discussions and meetings with AAUP, the UW-Madison Professors Group, and various faculty reps groups. Because of the importance of this policy, we've managed the task force much like a legislative committee. Jeff Burant, who has experience serving as a legislative clerk, has served as the the custodian of records, and the clerk for the committee. And every document that we've received, we've reviewed, and we're compiling a formal record. My hope is that in our next meeting in the next 2 weeks, we'll finish our work, and we'll have a draft policy ready to be forwarded to the Education Committee in ample time for them to take it up in February. Then it's my belief that after the February meeting, the policy itself will come to the board as a whole in March. Know that I've been very appreciative of all the stakeholders in this process. I personally have learned a lot. I think we've made very good ground, and I think we're on track.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice President Bailey. The Tuition Setting Policy Task Force, chaired by Regent Tim Higgins, had its second meeting last month. The group includes representatives from 10 UW campuses, as well as John Reineman, Secretary of Wisconsin Higher Educational Aids Board. The task force has been charged with reviewing existing policy, relevant literature and pricing models, and analyzing alternative tuition setting strategies. It will also be looking at cost of delivery for the educational experience of all of our UW students, trends in higher education marketplace, how needs and priorities of the state should influence the tuition setting process, and the relationship between tuition and affordability. I've asked the group to develop a policy recommendations on tuition setting and tuition increases for this board's consideration by the summer of 2016. The group's meeting have included several presentations, including one from National Higher Education financial expert Dennis Jones of the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems. There have also been informative discussions related to demographic trends in Wisconsin, financing and tuition setting strategies employed in other states, and existing policies and approaches within the UW system. When I met with the task force in October, to deliver the charge, I told them that it is important for all of us that our students, their families, legislators, and the people of Wisconsin fully comprehend and have confidence in our tuition setting policies and practices. I am confident, given the experience and the expertise of the members of the Tuition Setting Policy Task Force, that we're headed in the right direction. The group's next meeting is in mid-January. I'd also like to give a brief update on the rulemaking process regarding our proposed revisions to Chapter UWS 4, 7, 11, and 17. Last spring, the UW system initiated the rulemaking process to make necessary changes to the Wisconsin Administrative Code in order to comply with regulatory amendments under the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2013 and federal guidance issued by the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights as it relates to Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. On April 9, 2015, the proposed rules came to this board for approval and the resolution was adopted. On October 26, 2015, the board held a public hearing in regard to the proposed rules. Regent Jan Mueller presided over the hearing on behalf of the board. 14 individuals testified at the hearing. 6 written comments were received during the public comment period, which ended November 2nd, 2015. Upon review of all public comments, there were 4 main points that were consistently raised by a number of individuals that were pertinent to the proposed rules. I won't go into detail here. You have been provided with the materials. But one example is that the proposed revisions should include clear alignment with federal guidance and law, such as in the area of training or conflict of interest. In response, system administration considered all comments received and determined that certain modifications were necessary to address the main concerns regarding compliance with federal law and guidance. These modifications were considered consistent with the board's original resolution, so no additional board approval was necessary. These proposed rules have now been submitted to the governor's office for review and approval. Once the governor approves the proposed rules, they'll be submitted to the chief clerk of each house of the legislature for submission to the Joint Committee for Review of Administrative Rules and a standing committee. Upon completion of the passive review of each of these committees, the proposed rules will be returned to us for final review and then for publication. I'd like to personally thank Regent Jan Mueller for presiding over the meeting. Thank you very much, Jan. In a related note, I'd also like to thank Regent Mueller and Regent Peterson for chairing the recent mission change hearings. It's been a busy rulemaking over the last few months. Commencements. Well, it's the end of the year. It's December, and often it's a very busy time, but it's also an exciting time, especially for many students. We tend to think of graduation in May. Those ceremonies as springtime events with lilacs and flowers and a little more casual and comfortable clothes. But for many of our UW students, the big day happens in December. I can relate to that. I had 2 of my degrees in December. And it's often more exciting because the ceremonies are usually more personal and a bit smaller. In the coming weeks, about 10,000 students all around the UW system are expected to cross the stage to receive their hard-earned degrees. I know a number of regents are taking part in these ceremonies. Personally, I always look forward to this opportunity, and I think I speak for my colleagues when I say that. It is a privilege to be part of such a milestone in the day of an important day in the lives of so many people. And frankly, it's one of the most joyous parts of being a regent. Also, on behalf of the Board of Regents, I would like to congratulate UW-Madison student Colin Higgins, who is only one of 32 students nationwide to win a Rhodes Scholarship this year. Chancellor Blank, is Colin here today? All right. Well, we'll thank him in absence. This is a very prestigious honor, as you all know, which includes 2 to 3 years of study at England's Oxford University. This is the oldest international study program in the world. Colin, who hails from Middleton, Wisconsin, completes his undergraduate studies this past May. Triple majoring, yes, triple majoring with comprehensive honors in environmental studies, geography, and history. All of this is very impressive. He's currently a graduate student at the La Follette School of Public Affairs. Congratulations to Colin, to Chancellor Blank, and to UW-Madison on this very important honor. Let's give them all an applause. President Cross has his student spotlight and his faculty spotlight. And now I would like to present a regent spotlight. I am privileged today to recognize and honor the contributions of a fellow regent, Regent Emeritus Milton Mick Neshek. Welcome, Mick. 50 years ago, Nick Mashik was appointed to the Wisconsin State University's Board of Regents, on which he served until the 1971 merger legislation created the University of Wisconsin system. He was then appointed to serve on the system's inaugural Board of Regents. One of his first responsibilities as a regent of the newly formed system was to serve as a member of the Merger Implementation Study Committee. I guess we've had committees all through the years, haven't we? This committee, comprised of regents, faculty, students, citizens, and legislators, was charged with making recommendations to merge two distinct sections of statutes and policies related to tenure, faculty governance, and campus autonomy, transfer credits, student governance, admission and tuition, and many other issues. And we think we have difficulties. The vision and dedication of Regent Emeritus Neshek and the original members of the UW System Board of Regents led to a diverse but unified system of institutions that are among the best in higher education. Regent Neshek's commitment and service to UW System did not end in 1978 when he completed his term as a regent. Following his service on the Board of Regents, he served as a member of the UW-Milwaukee Board of Visitors. He also served as chair of the Governor's Commission on UW System compensation, developing a strong and balanced system of recommendations to strengthen the UW system and serve the interests of the state of Wisconsin. He continues to serve on UW-Madison's advisory board for the Division of International Studies and is a longtime and generous donor to both UWM Foundation and UW Foundation. As an officer of Kikkoman Food, Inc., Mick has been steadfast in encouraging the company's very important support of the UW system. Regent Neshek is a proud and loyal graduate of UW-Madison's class of 1952 and the UW Law School class of 1955. His loyalty to the UW system is shared by the members of his family who have earned as many as 15 UW degrees. Mick, would you please join me at the podium? Regent Emeritus Neshek's lifetime service of unwavering commitment to the UW system is truly inspirational. As I have invited him to join us to offer some reflections over the past 50 years, please join me in thanking and recognizing Nick Neshek for his long service to the UW system. Nick?
President Cross, President Milner, members of the Board of Regents, I want to thank you very, very much for this honor. This recognition is very heartwarming for me, and it'll carry memories all my rest of my life. You know, these things don't just happen. Somebody's got to give it a push. And my wife, Nancy, she sort of thought this would be a nice birthday present for my 85th birthday. So she enlisted the help of my fellow board of director members, Mr. James Haney, President Emeritus of WMC, and Dr. Gilles Bousquet, who was the director of the International Advisory Board, now back in the faculty as dean in the School of French and Italian, as I understand. So thank them from the bottom of my heart, all of you who helped make this happen. And of course, you can see I got quite a cheering section out here. Family, friends from Lake Geneva and all around the country who came to give me their support, and I thank you very much. I'd like to reflect a little bit on what the university has meant to me and my family, if I can do a little personal. My father came to this country as an immigrant. He was 10 years old, and they moved to a small farm in northern Wisconsin, a little town called Coleman. Dad had to go to work at 10 years of age to help support the family, so he couldn't go to school. He was illiterate. Mom had a 6th grade education. And it became very, very apparent that if we were going to try to attain some upward mobility, it could only happen if we all got a good education and a college education. I come from a family of 7. 6 of us went to college. And I got to tell you a little legacy about UW-Madison and my immediate family. As President Milner indicated, I'm a graduate of UW-Madison, both undergrad, law school. My son, Tom, undergraduate, Madison Law School. My daughter, Nancy, undergraduate and master's. My daughter-in-law, Donna, undergraduate in nursing, UW-Madison, and son-in-law, David, undergraduate, UW-Madison, also a business degree. My good colleague and board member, Mr. Kaz Shimizu, is here supporting me. He is the president and CEO of Kikkoman Foods, Inc. And he also is a UW graduate getting his MBA from Madison. So I had to tell you about that legacy because it is really something that I'm proud to have my immediate family. So thank you, my cheering section, thank you, Board of Regents, and all the people that make this happen. It's a great honor, and it'll live with me forever.
That is a heartwarming memory of our history. I turn it now over to President Cross.
Thanks, Mick, for sharing that story about your family. I suspect there are a number of folks sitting around here who have similar experiences, so we can identify with that. The impact the university has is truly significant. So thank you, Regent President Milner. I want to also thank and make recognition of Colin Higgins. This is our second Rhodes Scholar in the last couple of years, as you may remember, Teo from UW-Eau Claire. Really, really proud. It speaks to what this institution, what these institutions do, and we're really honored by them. Let me begin my report today by introducing Jeff Schoenfeld. Jeff, would you please stand? Jeff has joined our State Relations Department. He comes from Representative Nygren's office most recently, where he served as Finance Co-Chair's Chief of Staff. He brings with him over 20 years of state and federal legislative experience, both as a staff person and as a lobbyist. He's an incredible addition to our team. We look forward to working with him in the coming months. Welcome, Jeff. On my immediate staff, there are so many individuals whose names begin with J. James, John, Jeff, Jessica, Jill, Jane. You get the idea. Makes it difficult. Nonetheless, we welcome you, Jeff. On the legislative front, all of you have received the new legislative update and report from the State Relations Team and Vice President Villa. Moving forward, this will be a monthly report, moving to help the board and our regents stay closely engaged with the issues in the Capitol. At the state level, we continue to monitor a number of bills as legislators look to complete their work in February or March. The campus concealed carry bill, the legislation restricting the sale and the use of fetal body parts, are two proposals that are of great concern to the UW system, and we are fully engaged with legislative authors and leaders at the Capitol, as well as campus leaders. We will continue to keep you informed. In addition to our efforts at the state Capitol, we have continued our 4 Wisconsin tour with legislators, with K-12 partners, and several companies in Amarillo, Platteville, Appleton, New Berlin, Eau Claire, and Waukesha, and we have a few more scheduled. All of these visits have helped enhance our relationship with legislators and helped lead to a deeper understanding of the issues facing our state, and also informed our strategic planning process. At the federal level, we've seen a major shift in the opposition to the extension of the federal Perkins Loan Program. As you may recall, that was cut off, and now there seems to be a major shift on the part of Senator Lamar Alexander. He seems to be willing to end his blockade, in part because of the pressure we put on them to do that. And I want to extend my appreciation to Chris Andrews, to all of the chancellors who participated in that. That's a major victory, and a few weeks ago I thought that was impossible. Last week, the UW System Sexual Assault and Violence Task Force had an opportunity to meet with U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin to discuss Senate Bill 590, the Campus Accountability and Safety Act. The meeting was an opportunity to discuss some of our concerns about the specifics of that bill and how she might be able to help us craft it in a better way, which would be more useful and easier to deal with. In addition to that, as many of you know, I've been sharing some information about the Fair Labor Standards Act and the impact that could have on the university. The impact would be sizable by raising that minimum salary for individuals classified, unclassified, etc. So we're monitoring that very closely. Our campuses are working hard to try to determine how to mitigate the impact and how best to handle it. We'll try to give you more information as this goes on and we better understand that. As a reminder, the Federal Relations Team provides a bi-weekly blog with a rundown on key votes and issues should you be interested in some of that. If you've been looking at my calendar, which I doubt any of you really have been, but should you have looked at my calendar, you would have seen that I've been out of town considerably the last few weeks in Washington, D.C., and Indianapolis, New York City, Chicago, speaking with higher education leaders around the state around the country about a number of issues, lobbying legislators in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., speaking at some conferences. It's part of my effort to expand our role and influence on national issues. Speaking of leadership, and national standing, I really want to acknowledge and applaud Chancellor Blank's recent appointment to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission on the future of undergraduate education. Chancellor Blank joined some prestigious leaders in higher education, finance, and charitable fields in examining the state of post-secondary education in America. Chancellor Blank, we're really proud to have your insight and your vision contributing to this important work, so thank you. On the strategic planning front, in September, we began our statewide strategic planning listening session tour. We've been thinking about getting a t-shirt. You know how rock bands do that to all these different places they visit? Well, maybe most of you don't know what rock bands do, so we've been thinking about these t-shirt ideas. In an effort to advance this process, the completion of our next strategic plan, I probably put on a couple thousand, maybe more miles, visiting different communities, talking on different campuses or area around the campuses, talking to business leaders, engaging them in this, what we call a formal listening process. We've held 13 of them. We've invited many participants inside in a separate session to provide us input as well, and we really do appreciate everyone that has done that. Now we begin the process of refining that and bringing it down to develop action strategies to deal with the issues that we've been presented with. These common themes or ideas that keep emerging. You should be doing this, you should be doing more of this, less of that. What are we doing about it? It may sound like we've reached a conclusion, but quite frankly, we're actually just getting started. As I summarized in an email update for you a couple of weeks ago, we are on to the next phase. It will involve narrowing of the broad data, bringing it from the listening sessions into a group of what we call experts who help us refine that down. We're also looking at specific stakeholder input, groups that we feel may not have been as heavily involved in the broader picture. So, last week we also launched an online survey that invites the general public to provide us input, and all other stakeholders. We already have exceeded 3,000 inputs from that in just a very short period of time. I want to note that the survey is not scientific, wasn't intended to be statistically significant. No, that's not the point. The whole idea was to gather more information to see how it correlates or may not correlate with data we had previously received. So it's more or less to validate or compare with what else we're doing. The survey remains open through December the 14th, and you can find it on our strategic planning website. I encourage you to spread the word and help others provide us with information that will help us find a very good direction for the future of the university. We're also continuing our efforts to develop and strengthen more relationships with key external and business leaders, one of my ongoing priorities on my goal list. Earlier this week, I participated in the second annual Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce Future Wisconsin Economic Summit, where I joined state economic development partners in providing some progress reports on our talent development initiative. By the way, the whole session was basically around talent development and the importance of that to the state of Wisconsin. We are just beginning to define a new vision and initiative in collaboration with chancellors and external partners like Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. What we're attempting to do is look for ways to introduce each and every UW system student in their junior or senior year to a Wisconsin business and the opportunities afforded them here in Wisconsin. This won't be easy, and we don't know exactly how this is going to work out. We don't have a detailed plan. That's the goal. Now, how do we craft a way to make that happen? I'm also pleased to report that we've made some significant progress on several key leadership positions within the system. We will be interviewing finalists next week for the new Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs, replacing David Ward, who has so graciously agreed to stay on for the next 10 years. Perhaps I misquoted him on it. Let me share again how grateful we are to David for continuing to delay his retirement and ensuring continuity in this important role. We've also launched the search process for 2 new positions, the Special Assistant for the Office of Educational Opportunity. This is the person who will manage the new charter school authority as required by the legislature. And we are also in the middle of the search for a new Special Assistant for Diversity and Inclusion. The latter position will be focused on broadening inclusion efforts to statewide and external stakeholders and partners, and also coordinating programs internally. Next, a quick update on our progress to develop new accountability metrics in 4 major areas: financial management, administrative management, educational performance, and research and economic development. We have developed specific metrics within each of these areas, and we've discussed them with Senator Hartsdorf and with Representative Murphy. We'll be working with chancellors and identifying goals for each of these metrics. We shared most of those with you previously. Some will be system goals and institutional goals, and some will be either system or institutional goals. At this time, there's more work to do before we finalize these metrics and present them to the board and subsequently to the respective legislative committees, hopefully sometime in January. I should note that our efforts to fully implement our accountability dashboard and related metrics play a key role in continuing to rebuild and improve relationships with legislators. This is something that's important to them as well as us. Ideas update. Today, I also want to share some background on recent UW system administration reforms related to inclusivity, diversity, and equity in academic affairs. Earlier this year, we made the strategic decision to move positions that had previously resided in certain areas of UW system administration in order to more effectively serve students and our campuses. In many cases, that meant a reorganization and moved positions and responsibilities to different departments and to campuses, but also expand our efforts to reach statewide and external groups from this office. In summary, here's what has changed, just so you have a sense of it. Campus chancellors will be held accountable for improving overall enrollment and of underrepresented minorities, for reducing the underrepresented minority graduation gap, and for reducing the underrepresented minority retention gap. Those 3 specific areas and outcomes. Legal counsel, education, and training related to diversity and inclusivity matters will come under the Office of General Counsel for the UW system. Responsibility for collecting and sorting data related to diversity and inclusivity matters will be assigned to the Office of Institutional Research. Responsibility for student success, completing reports related to diversity and inclusivity for management or for compliance matters, and for providing leadership in important areas related to student diversity and inclusivity will be assigned to the Associate Vice President for Student Success, who reports to David at this point, who will also have responsibility for other areas traditionally included in student affairs. The Office of Human Resources and Workforce Diversity will continue to focus on inclusion and diversity within the UW system workforce. These changes also coincide with our efforts to create and fill the new Special Assistant for Diversity and Inclusion I mentioned earlier. The person in this new position will focus on all these external relations with statewide groups and how the university can play a greater role in impacting the challenges facing that particular group of stakeholders. The idea is not to just be internally focused, but also externally focused. We can't just be concerned about ourselves, but also those around us in a fashion, because the university is so inextricably interconnected to the issues facing the state and the challenges we must all overcome. Well, with that, I'd like to share some news from around the UW system. I'll try to do this not as fast as I typically do because there are a number of good points, but I want to remind you that our website includes a much deeper summary on these, so if I just tick them off, Please don't think that I'm trying to treat them as a minor issue. There's more depth there. In an exciting research development, UW-Madison scientists have succeeded in growing functional vocal cord tissues in the laboratory. I think I could use some help. Becky, probably going to be first in line here. This is really pretty amazing if you think about growing tissue. It's truly a remarkable advancement. I'd also like to note that Madison was just, I believe, yesterday, it was announced that 8 Madison students received Fulbright scholarships. That's more than any other institution in the country. So congratulations. Once again, people are looking at Wisconsin from the rear. They're following. Perhaps that wasn't a good way to express it. For the 4th time in 5 years, the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and the Council for Advancement and Support of Education has presented the Wisconsin Professor of the Year. Now think about this. For the 4th time in 5 years, Wisconsin Professor of the Year honors to a faculty member from UW-La Crosse. Biology Professor Roger Haro received the recognition in Washington, D.C. in November. Congratulations to UW-La Crosse, to Joe and his faculty and staff. Professor Haro, that's wonderful. Once again, they're looking at us from behind, right? The UW-Milwaukee School of Continuing Education, in partnership with UW Extension, is improving the quality of care for youth who have experienced family crises. More than 300 practitioners have participated in the professional development training designed with support of a grant from the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families Division of Youth Services, really having an impact on a major issue. Manufacturing companies have saved more than $6.5 million thanks to Department of Energy funding that has enabled UW-Milwaukee faculty and students to go into those companies and analyze their energy usage and make recommendations and to promote changes. UW Stout is collaborating with state and national partners on 2 new initiatives to help people with disabilities obtain employment and become more involved in their communities. Pause here. One of the elements in the mission of the university, as articulated in state statute, to improve the human conditions for all. Tremendous work from UW Stout. My compliments. Dr. Elise Cohen from UW-Manitowoc has been gaining national attention and international attention for her scholarly work on refugee crises around the world. You can imagine how timely that is. She's just been invited to speak in London on the refugee crisis and the responsibility to protect individuals. UW-Eau Claire continues to be a national leader among master's level colleges with respect to study abroad activities, according to the 2015 Open Doors report of the Institute for International Education. UW-Eau Claire has over 490 students studying abroad. Wow. They rank 27th nationally among public and private master's level institutions in the overall number of students they send abroad. Congratulations, Jim. That's a great thing. Also, a shout out to UW-Eau Claire's men's cross country team, which earned its first national title. Congratulations again to the Blue Bulls. UW Superior is pleased to announce that the Lake Superior National Estuarine, that's an estuarine, and I don't know how to pronounce it correctly when it's in that particular format. Research Reserve received a federal grant to renovate a new public learning center on Barker Island in Superior. The award totals more than $300,000 with a match provided by UW Extension. It's anticipated to be open in the summer of 2017. It's expected to be a highly visible resource for public for a public and economic stimulus for the city of Superior. Congratulations, Renee. UW River Falls recently held its annual showcase celebrating the research, scholarly activity, and creative activities of more than 200 undergraduate students. Participation in this event, which has been held for the past 3 years, has grown more than tenfold thanks to the campus's intentional focus on fostering high-impact practices. Congratulations, Dean, and your staff. UW-Platteville has seen significant growth in women in the fields of engineering, mathematics, and science. In just the past 5 years, just 5 years now, the number of women enrolled in the College of Engineering, Mathematics, and Science has increased by 72%, while overall college enrollment has increased by 34% over the same period. That's impressive. That's impressive, Dennis. The UW-Stevens Point ROTC program was honored for overall excellence by the 3rd Army ROTC Brigade. The Northwoods Battalion, which includes UW-Stevens Point and partner ROTC programs at Stout, River Falls, and Eau Claire, was named the 2015 overall top program in several areas: logistics, administration, recruiting, retention, as well as operations. That's impressive. AT&T is investing further in UW Parkside's Maker Space. This is a creative space and lab where students gather to invent and learn. Sounds like a pretty fun place. With support from companies such as AT&T, UW Parkside is able to purchase state-of-the-art technology that allows students to enhance their skills for the workplaces of the future. Veterans and UW Green Bay students, Ashley Wiles and Sean Gleason, are capturing the voices of Northeast Wisconsin veterans in a class project. The oral histories they are collecting provide a personal narrative so future generations can better understand the sacrifices our veterans have made and the realities of war. The students hope to expand the project to make it widely accessible for the campus, community, and the state. UW Whitewater sophomore communications major Sam Lukács won Best Startup at the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization National Conference. That's a big deal. That's a really nice thing. His startup, now get this, Hook Up TV Mounts, creates mental hooks that fasten to the back of TVs for mounting on lofted beds. It's a neat idea. Warhawk entrepreneurs won national honors in social media and marketing presence, fundraising, and advising. Congratulations, good stuff. A UW Oshkosh students' research project has led to improved policing in the city of Kaukauna. With the support of businesses and citizens, Tyler Romanesco helped obtain a canine unit for the police department. The Dutch Shepherd named Rocco and his handler spent 6 weeks this fall training. Their first day on the job was October 1st. Congratulations, Tyler. Good stuff. That concludes my news from around the system, so let me emphasize that these are just some of the ways our campuses are having an impact on our communities, our businesses, and the people of this state. So now I'd like to switch to the faculty spotlight. This month, these are the people who do this, and it's always good to honor them. This month, we are pleased once again to turn the spotlight on a UW System faculty member's service and contributions. Let me welcome Katie Stern, professor of UW-Stevens Point, Department of Computing and New Media Technologies. Katie, would you join us at the table here for a minute? I think you'll see her teaching is truly igniting a passion in her students for the creative use of digital media. And she does it in some pretty creative ways. So cue the video, please.
Well, I'm Katie Stern. I've been teaching here for, I guess this is my 9th year. I teach in the Web and Digital Media Development major. It's a part of the Computing and New Media Technologies department.
She teaches a variety of courses that range all the way from our introductory course to the major, all the way through more advanced courses that our graduating seniors are taking in their final semester.
I wrote 2 different books on photography. The textbook really helped define a lot of the concepts that I teach in my classes. My biggest challenge and the most important thing I do is teach students how to learn. How do we become lifelong learners of the software programs we have to use?
Learning to experiment with the programs and troubleshoot, it's very helpful.
She just made it fun. There's no such thing as a stupid question in her class. If she's not quite sure, she'll research it, bring it to you the next day, and explain it to the class as well.
I love creating video tutorials for my students. I do that a lot. I have a home studio set up.
To see her whole process from start to finish was fun because it's actually, this was her doing it. It wasn't just, okay, theoretically if you were to do it. No, this is how you do it. If I'm ever having issues, I can go back and see, these are the buttons I need to press, these are the things I need to do to get that result.
Students love it. It makes things much more complex for me time-wise. A 4 to 6 minute video done well can take me 4 hours to produce, but the grades went up, the enthusiasm went up in those classes, and the independent projects that students did later really improved.
She does say often that she's learning along with us, working through these problems, troubleshooting, which is really helpful. It makes it seem less stressful.
We're talking one day in her office about what I was going to be teaching and what it was about, and she said, oh my gosh, I really want to take this course. I need to take this course. I need to know about this. And I said, well, you know, come take the course.
My own learning probably takes approximately 50% of my time. At home, I have my computer monitor set up, and I'm up on my treadmill, and I'm walking, and I'm watching lynda.com videos while my husband's in the other room watching television in the evening. I mean, I've got to do this. This is what's required by my job. I adore lynda.com because it allows me to take tutorials in the software programs I teach from industry leaders.
Our world is a little bit different in the sense that the technology for us changes every 12 to 18 months.
There is no such thing as pulling out my notes, reviewing my notes, and going in and teaching the same class that I taught the semester before. That's never going to happen for me. Everything has to be updated. And that's actually how I spend my summers.
There's just a remarkable amount of preparation that has to go into courses like those.
For us to pick up new subjects to teach is critically important. I have to be willing to move outside of my field of comfort and learn things I've never done before, do things I've never done before for the benefit of the department. I have news feeds that I receive on a daily basis, updating me on the new changes for the digital world. I need to do that because I need to relate what I do and what I teach to the computing world. And that takes hours and hours every week. That's also really important when it comes to serving on certain screen committees because I need to be able to evaluate potential professors.
I think one of the things that's so special about her is the fact that she just wants to help.
We have 3 new faculty, and so she's creating short little tutorial videos to help our new faculty settle in.
I have gone to her constantly over the last couple of years. She really knows the students and what they're capable of and how to push them a little further. Whenever I'm trying to figure out what to do, I stop and I say, you know, WWKD, what would Katie do?
I really appreciate the support she gives both in the classroom and outside of the classroom.
If you're a beginner, you don't really know much, she's great at explaining. If you find that curriculum is too easy, she'll challenge you.
She's always very enthusiastic about what she teaches, and she's always there to help. She honestly cares about what you're doing and what your projects have come and what your goals are and how they change over time and how she can actually help you reach them.
I will email people or call people who have written textbooks and ask questions. I will check with people on LinkedIn. I'm always trying to get up to those experts, to those gurus, to the people who are considered worldwide experts, and those are my mentors. And I won't settle for anything less than that. I want to teach to those industry standards so our students can go out and get jobs. My main goal is that the students can earn an income that puts a roof over their head and food on their table.
ask Katie to come to the table because you may have some questions for her, but this is just one of the amazing faculty in our system.
Katie, I have a comment and also a question. You talked about you're in a unique position where typically a professor will create a format for a class, and then there will be some revisions, but by and large that lays the foundation for several more years to come. Tell us a little bit more about the challenges you have about such rapid changes in technology that you have to deal with.
It's certainly a very time-consuming effort to keep up with everything that goes on. Anyone who has worked in the computer field is going to know that every day there's something different. So it's not only a matter of preparing the classroom situation, but it's also a constant challenge to figure out with all of the changes and all of the technology inventions that are going on, what is the base level? What is the most important concepts for the students to learn at the freshman level? And what can we do to also encourage girls and women to come into STEM? How can we get more people to come into, and actually we are now into STEAM, which I'm very happy about that the arts are also a part of it. How can we encourage people to get over their fear of computing and their fear of coding and come in and be positive students along with that? So while I am practicing and working on all the individual software programs, I'm also looking at all of these different aspects of the field. How can we encourage our students to get into this field? And then how can we support them and also make sure that they are going to succeed and they're going to continue in this field? So part of what I do also is study how students learn from a cognitive level. How do the brains absorb this information? And how can we change even our base level training so that the brains can actually absorb the information and maintain that information faster? And that's what started this whole video piece.
Thank you. Tim?
Professor, this seems to me to be an area that lends itself to geekishness. And,
really?
And so I wonder, the video mentioned beginners several times.
Yes.
I'm just wondering how many people you get to come into your class who are not even close to being beginners, they're way beyond that. And do they, do you find people like that, and do they challenge you in what you're doing?
Certainly I get challenged on a regular basis, and I love it, because that way I'm going to learn more as well. But it's interesting to me that many students come into the computer graphics field, which is more the art world, having been self-trained, having really, you go on and there are a million tutorials for Photoshop. You can have a great time. But have you met those industry standards? Are you going to be able to go out and get a job in those fields? And the answer is it's dangerous to try to do that, because as these people go out, not only can you ruin files, but you can destroy files, you can lose them. And if you don't have that industry standard understanding, that job isn't going to last. And the pay isn't going to be there either.
Thank you.
Regent Farrell?
No, go ahead.
Oh, Regent Bradley.
Okay. Professor, I think it was yesterday, Wiscape from the Madison campus issued a policy paper on the skills gap, studying it, and came up with a series of recommendations for Wisconsin policymakers, people in higher education. One of the recommendations that they made was that instead of cutting K through 12 and higher education resources, policymakers should invest considerably more money, especially in the training of teachers.
Yes.
So I see this video and I see that you're doing a lot of training, and I'd just like you to comment. If you look back 10 or 15 years ago at the institutional support that you and your colleagues got so that you could stay up in your fields, as opposed to whatever level of institutional support including 0, that you might have for that kind of training that you need to stay at the top of your game, how does it compare?
I honestly have to thank our chancellor and our provost, Greg Summers, who is here, for supporting us in professional development, because our department depends on it. And we do have good professional development support. I've also been able to, and I think one of the major changes is that in the past, 10, 15 years ago, I'd have to go to Atlanta, Georgia, which I did several times, and receive training sometimes 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 days. I would be gone for a week from class, so there were all of these large expenses. And now you can get that kind of training online, provided you're willing to do the work. So I just finished a 6-week online course in animation, all online. It took me about an extra 20 hours per week on top of everything else I do to manage that work. But the training I received was world class. So the difference for me is that I can get this training online now. The support has always been there. I've been at UW Stevens Point for 9 years. Before that, I was at NCAA Area Technical College for 4 years in their 9 years in their graphic design program, and I received substantial support all the way along, and I'm very grateful for it.
Regent Carroll?
I'd love your reaction, but I want to make a layman-type observation. When I was raising my 5 sons, it was Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
And it was a good long time that they sat and listened to him, and there was, and I was in elementary education, so I'm looking at that concept. Now I'm looking at my grandchildren, you can't hold them for 5 minutes.
I know.
Because it's all instant, it's all in their hands, it's mobile and what have you. And I would say to people, I don't know how we're going to keep those kids in the classroom, because their attention span, almost the training they've had, which they don't realize is training, it's the way they live, doesn't lend itself to being able to concentrate for a chapter in a book, God help us, much less anything longer. I think watching what we just watched of you, you have found a way with your short videos that you described. You've got those kids, and you're almost back making their brains open and then extending that. And I just can't applaud you enough for what you found as the secret to success and your ongoing need, certainly, to continue. I can't believe how wonderful you're improving your own product that you're putting in the classroom, but then leading them to their success. I want to applaud you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is a real challenge, and it's sometimes easier because of these videos. And then there's this thing called a syllabus. And a syllabus can have rules. And you can state rules and maintain a fair amount of control that says, you know, there are certain times that it's appropriate for you to use social media. There are certain times when it's not. And then if you're strong enough to maintain those rules, you can also maintain and then keep an engaging conversation going. And you can still keep students involved with lectures, because some of my classes are done in lecture form. So it is possible, but yes, we use every trick in the book.
Thank you.
Speaking of every trick in the book, I need some Photoshop work on some pictures I've been taking of me. A small gift I'd like to give you, Ellen. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, and thank you very much. Let's give it a Now, we're going to move on to the business part of our meeting, which includes a report and approval of actions taken, first of all, by our Education Committee. Regent Whitburn?
As President Cross indicated, we will be interviewing the finalist for David Ward's Vice President position next week, and by this time next week we should have a hire in place. Not on board, but a decision made. The committee approved 6 academic programs for 3 different campuses. Interestingly, we have approved and recommend to the full board a new online doctorate of occupational therapy at Madison. This will be the 2nd online doctorate in our system, the first being at UWM in nursing. Speaking of UWM, they have asked for a Bachelor's of Science in Biomedical Engineering, a master's in information technology management, a master's in athletic training, and a master's in fine arts in dance. Finally, a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience at River Falls has been requested, and the committee is comfortable with all. I would therefore move resolutions 11C, D1, D2, D3, D4, and resolution 11E.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Chancellor Miller has been working on a major reorganization at UW Green Bay. At one point at Green Bay, we had 5 colleges. Today, we have 2, the College of Liberal Arts and Science and the College of Professional Studies. With broad community and campus support, Chancellor Miller proposes a reorganization under which we'll have a College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, the College of Science and Technology, the College of Health, Education, and Social Welfare, and the redesignation of the Austin E. Colfrin School of Business as a standalone unit. Resolution 11F authorizes this reorg, and I would move it.
Is there a second? All right, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
In really a novel reorganization at UW-Stevens Point, Chancellor Patterson is proposing the creation of the University College, bringing together all of the student success units under one umbrella in the Division of Academic Affairs. The Dean of the college will report to the Provost. Resolution 11G authorizes this action, and I move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
As you will recall, we are updating and tuning up as appropriate the various mission statements across the system. And in Resolution 11H, we are approving the new mission statement at UW-Stevens Point. Regent Jan Mueller handled the public hearing. I will move Resolution 11H as well as Resolution 11J, under which we are updating faculty rules at UW Superior at the request of Chancellor Wachter and her faculty.
A second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The Education Committee also concurred in the second reading of select mission changes for UW Extension. Under the change, the extension will be authorized to offer certificates and a bachelor's degree in business and management, as well as a UW System transfer associate degree. Resolution 11I provides this approval, and I would move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have learned that there's a need for a supplemental resolution which directs UW Extension to seek accreditation from the Higher Learning Commission. I'll ask Executive Director Radu to read the resolution, and then I ask for a motion to approve it.
The resolution is, the board formally requests that UW Extension begin the Higher Learning Commission's accreditation process as quickly as possible by submitting its application materials that will initiate this process.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Finally, the Education Committee considered, and after good discussion, unanimously adopted Resolution 11K, which reaffirms and reiterates our commitment to academic freedom and freedom of expression. I would move this resolution, Resolution 11K. If it's seconded, I believe President Cross would like to provide introductory comments.
I'm going to precede President Cross. I have a clarification and a point of background.
Second.
Oh, is there a second?
I'll make the second.
Oh, thank you. I want to thank you, but before moving into discussion, a little bit of clarification. The Regents' decision to propose this statement is not, I repeat, not in response to any recent event. Some background. The board expanded, reaffirmed, or actively discussed its commitment to academic freedom at least 7 times since the 1894 Ely case. In 1922, 1949, 1962, 1964, 1985, on the 100th anniversary in 1994, and most recently in 2011 during the presidency of our colleague Regent Pruitt. The details were in your materials. Clearly, the board's reaffirmation of academic freedom is both in keeping with past actions and timely to reassure faculty that and UW institutions that we have an ongoing commitment to these important criteria, these important freedoms. The companion issue of freedom of speech or freedom of expression is a critical component of academic freedom and a topic of deep concern across campuses of higher education today. By reviewing past board, and in my review of past board actions, I was particularly struck by a quote in 1985 by then acting President Catherine Lyle. She said, "Disagreement and debate is the stuff of which learning is made. We do not fear it. It should be done openly, without threat or coercion. Great universities share this common commitment to open expression." Wisconsin has always been a leader in these concepts, so reaffirming academic freedom and affirming the freedom of expression is in keeping with our commitment to the important fearless sifting and winnowing to find the truth. President Cross?
Thank you, Regent President Milner. It's good for this board, as have previous boards, to reaffirm our commitment to academic freedom and freedom of expression. Periodically, we all need to be reminded of the foundational principles upon which this great university was built. About 130 years ago, your predecessors vigorously, and I say vigorously, defended Professor Ely's academic freedom with adoption of the now famous Sifting and Winnowing report. In doing so, they carved academic freedom and freedom of expression forever into the foundational bedrock of this university. Ely, he later claimed that the board's guarantee of academic freedom was so important that it was the equivalent of Wisconsin's Magna Carta. Think about that. The sifting and winnowing metaphor, an agricultural one, I admit, both inspires and obligates us. It inspires us because it moves us emotionally with its simple yet eloquent expression of truth. A truth that has endured. That learning communities must have unfettered freedom in their pursuit of truth. It has become the symbolic cornerstone of this great institution. Just like the English poet and scholar John Milton, back in the 1600s, argued in his heralded work, Area Pogetica, the board realized that by letting, his quote now, truth and falsehood grapple in a free and open encounter, truth prevails. Yes, that 1894 board report was inspirational, but it was not merely inspirational. It also obligated the entire university community to constantly be vigilant in defense of these freedoms. Even today, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the echoes of that 1894 board and several subsequent boards urging us to diligently guard this precious legacy. In 1894, the university enrolled less than 1,200 students. Most of them were from Wisconsin. Most of them were white males. Today, we enroll 180,000 students representing every country, corner, and culture of the world. This is a dramatically different university than it was in 1894, when our predecessors permanently seared this now cherished principle into our conscience. But this principle, one of the foundational pillars upon which this university was built, like all great truth, in spite of all this change, remains steadfast. Threats from subtle foes and disguised forces must be challenged and overcome, because this principle is just that important. In fact, Milton further argued that the liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely, according to one's conscience, is above all other liberties. If we, the entire university, fail to value, protect, and defend these fundamental freedoms, the university will fail. That is why this obligation is so important. If the priority assigned to free expression by the nature of a university is to be maintained in practice, not just in principle, clearly the responsibility for maintaining that priority rests with its members, all of its members. As the president of this university system, I challenge all of us within the university to recommit ourselves to upholding the commitments to academic freedom and freedom of expression made by earlier boards and reaffirmed by this board today. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. Regent Delgado.
Thank you. I want to talk in support of the resolution, and I want to give it kind of a personal tone. I'm not as academic as you are, I'm sorry. And the tone is like this. In 1960 or so, I was a high school student in Cuba, and I was as outspoken then as I was now, and I knew more. And I had a very great argument, periodic argument with my communist uncle. He ended up being a big shot in the government, and at the time he was a young communist, you know, veteran of the revolution. And I had the best of it. At one point he said, listen, you better shut up. We are executing people younger than you for less than what you're seeing, and I will not be able to help you. I was 13 years old. Okay, the idea that somebody wants to control anything you can say, the idea that somebody wants to say that has already been decided, the idea that somebody can come out and say you can't talk about that, is something which I find anathema. Personally, because of the rebelliousness of youth hasn't quite burnt out, but also because it's the whole idea of truth. The moment you know you got it, you ain't. Okay? And you gotta be able to listen hard, even if it hurts. So, I'm gonna say something. I think this is very timely. I think it's timely because, without going into details, and I think that the ability to speak in this country in a rational academic way, which I think is the purpose of the university, you said so way, and something in which is very important for us to be able to mature our own thought, is under attack. I think there's great intolerance from many, many, many people. And I want to make sure, with this statement, I support it because I think we're telling everybody that University of Wisconsin system, nobody, but nobody, settles the argument with total control. Nobody has the right to do it. There are bounds, there are legal bounds, there are moral bounds, a whole bit, but within those bounds of academic, we are open to all subjects. And I want to finish by saying these are not just pretty words that we're going to put in a brass plaque against Bascom Hall someplace next to the Chancellor's office. I really expect that there will be consequences. I know there are policies in every campus. I think that the campuses have to look at their policies and align with it. From my perspective, this is something that we have to revise and review periodically. The ability to discuss things openly is essential to us. And we need to make sure that we are always prepared to handle properly people who would like to control us. Thank you.
Regent Pruitt.
Thank you, President Milner. And I would just like to be indulged, if I could, for a couple, three questions here. I'm sort of modeling my behavior after my friend and colleague Regent Mueller. Whenever she's presented a document on the budget, we go through a series of questions, and on an issue and topic of this sort, I did have some questions that I was hoping, either President Cross, President Milner, or Chair Whitburn might help me sort through. And first of all, thank you for Regent Milner and President Cross for sort of the explanation of kind of the motivation of this. And I was a little wondering about that going in. We saw some reports in the newspaper, but there wasn't a lot in the document. So I really appreciate the very thoughtful comments you both made about the legacy and tradition of academic freedom and freedom of expression in the system. My first question is really about process and timing. And I was curious how and why this is starting at the board level and moving down as opposed to starting at the campus level and moving up. I know there are different ways that these kinds of resolutions and positions are taken, but I would think often they might start at the faculty and campus level and move their way up through the shared governance process to the board level, where the board would review and adopt. And I was wondering if either in the committee level or in other levels there were discussions about that and why this process might be a superior process to the other one. And related to that, could you share sort of what role our shared governance partners, faculty, students, and others have had in terms of offering opinions and ideas on this resolution?
Regent Whitburn, did you want to?
Sure. I think President Cross may want to weigh in as well. Regent Pruitt, no change in the principles or values of our predecessors around this table is intended in any phrase, paragraph, or in totality in this resolution. This is a reaffirmation and a reiteration of our long-standing commitment to these principles. That would be my answer.
Mr. Cross?
I think the question in my mind is how to practice this wisely, and I believe that's part of what you're getting at, Regent Pruitt. I believe this does require conversations. That is the currency of higher education. How do we practice this wisely? How do we understand this so that all voices are heard and listened to? And not just, and this is a personal statement for me, it has to be owned. And in my remarks, understanding what these principles mean and have meant to this organization historically must also mean that we embrace them as a community of learners. And how then do we practice it so that we truly do our best to listen to others and not just tolerate them, but respect them. A civil discourse that engages parties in the process of understanding. Really, it's hard for learning to take place in those disagreements that Catherine Lyle talked about if there isn't a willingness to listen and understand. And I think what the board is attempting to do is reaffirm the principle. Now the burden is placed on us to continue the conversation and engage the shared governance. I too think if this is only a top-down process, that it will have failed. It has to be engaged by the whole community. students, faculty, and staff. This is a ethos that must be embedded in our character as people in the academy. It's that important. And how do we do it? And it's good to reaffirm this every once in a while. But unless we own it, it becomes a mechanical process, not a true value.
Thank you, and thank you both. I mean, both your comments, I think, from both Regent Whitburn and President Cross are very reassuring to me, and I think are important. I would note, if I might, next question is really related very directly to what you were indicating, President Cross, in terms and also Regent Whitburn. Whenever we do a new resolution, we build on the past, but we also create a new record and a new, sort of what have you done for me lately theory. And, as I looked at this resolution, there certainly are many components that I agree with, but there was this paragraph that just took me a little, if not by surprise, at least stirred in me a little concern. And that was the paragraph that says, of course, different ideas in the university community will often and quite naturally conflict, but it is not the proper role of the university to attempt to shield individuals from ideas and opinions they or others find unwelcome, disagreeable, or even deeply offensive. Although the university greatly values civility, concerns about civility and mutual respect can never be used as justification for closing off discussion of ideas, however offensive or disagreeable those ideas may be to some members within the university community. One of my academic mentors, a fellow by the name of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, used to say words matter, and words have consequences. And I guess the question here is, and I think President Cross, you began to answer that very effectively, but I guess I'm wondering, where do we go from here? And, where could this go off track? And where could someone take words such as that as part of a Regent resolution and use it in a way that perhaps not even the authors of this resolution intended? And I guess I'm curious how we struggle with that.
Someone want to answer this?
Sure.
I'll answer in a few pragmatic ways. First of all, the timing of the resolution. This, as Regent Whitburn says, is no different than our policies have been, in the past. And to time, we have had, with the transfer of tenure from statute to policy, there have been questions from the faculty and there have been questions from the campus community about what is our commitment to academic freedom. And clearly this is a time that we have to remind them that our commitment is unfettered, that we have a full commitment to academic freedom. With respect to the paragraph that you're talking about, that's something that needs real attention from the campuses for a variety of reasons. Typically, we are concerned with academic freedom, freedom of speech, from the perspective of the speaker, from the perspective of the person who is doing the action. I have a real concern from the perspective of the students that we're training. And for me, and I speak only for myself, for me, one of the very important skills that I learned when I was very young going through the university was having the strength to listen, to hear, and to stand up to things that I found inherently objectionable. And not only to stand up to it for myself, but to stand up to it for others. So that kind of, I call it an intellectual muscle, I call it a personal muscle. We need to pay attention and ensure that our students have an opportunity to develop that kind of strength. Develop that within an environment where they have the opportunity to speak their thoughts as well as to respond to something that they find objectionable. And I feel that that's a concept that we cannot lose in the academy.
May I try to follow up on your point, Regent Pruitt, just briefly? I think this is one of those areas that it's healthy for shared governance, staff, students to grapple with, to have that debate. How do we ensure this? I think the board is attempting to reaffirm its commitment to this. Now saying to us, are you practicing it wisely? There are a number of individuals who may not understand what freedom of expression, academic freedom means. How do we practice this wisely? If we don't, I think we fail in our pursuit of truth. So for the next step for me is to carry on this conversation with shared governance leaders and with chancellors, try to identify ways we might be helpful in helping students and helping our staff and faculty who may not understand it. What are the things that we should do? We'll take a look at our practices, how we practice it. Are we making sure this is a hallmark principle in what we do? And then are we implementing it with care and caution and respect for the parties involved? If we don't do that, then it's not as useful and it's not as effective as it should be.
If I might just, and then I'll be done, but I appreciate both of your responses, and again, very well said. And I have, just for the record, have an enormous faith and confidence in both you, President Cross, and our chancellors and the folks on the campuses. My concern, and the reason I really can't support this resolution, is just my fear of context. And I don't feel as if this resolution has sufficient context, that there really isn't a therefore in it. And my friend and colleague, Regent Delgado, has suggested, that there, as a result of this resolution, there will be consequences, and that is, and I respect those views and that opinion. And my concern is simply the question of have we thought through what all those consequences might be, and will we, in the process that you outline, as we have a robust conversation at the campuses, is there a risk here that folks will turn and say, well, the Regents have made their position quite clear on this? And so it's my concern about that, and my belief that potentially this could stand a little more vetting and a little more robust discussion at a variety of places that I won't be able to support. But thank you very much for indulging me in my nonsense. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Not nonsense.
Regent Higgins.
Well, I think Regent Pruitt has provided a good platform for at least my personal response in terms of the context of this resolution. When the system was formed, the legislature created it in the public interest and specified that its mission was teaching, research, and public service. Implicit in the university's mission was that free and untrammeled intellectual inquiry is the essence of each of these objectives. As you can see from the historical perspective provided by Regent President Milner and in the executive summary of the resolution, for 121 years we have not deviated from the spirit of the Regents' sifting and winnowing statement, nor is the university doing so now. However, in recent times, the commitment of other colleges and universities to academic freedom and freedom of expression has been publicly called into question. By adopting this resolution, we will be clearly saying that the freedom of speech guarantees of the First Amendment underpin UW's three-part mission to educate, do research, and engage in public service. Adopting this resolution reaffirms our commitment to academic freedom and freedom of expression and answers an unspoken question in the minds of many of our stakeholders. We will reassure our faculty that they can build their class outlines around whatever scholarly resources are most appropriate. We will reassure our researchers that their search for truth is unconstrained except by the standards of scholarly rigor. We will reassure our students and their families that students will continue to be taught how to think and learn, not what to think or what they may not learn. We will reassure the people of Wisconsin that their university system is committed to graduating Wisconsin's civic, social, and business leaders with the critical and reasoning skills they need to meet the challenges of the future. And finally, we will reassure the legislature that we Regents are faithfully executing our charge to govern the university in the public interest. So I strongly support this resolution, and I urge you to join me by voting in the affirmative.
Regent Delgado. Excuse me, Regent Vasquez.
I understand what the comments that were made about the transition that we're going through and the need to give faculty assurances that we adhere to academic freedom, and I don't have any problem with any of that. The difficulty that I'm having with this resolution is the portion that has to do with the freedom of expression. And I'm finding that one to be akin to the whole issue from my perspective on all that has been going around, talked about the faculty tenure, which I've described in the past, that we seem to be addressing a problem that some people have found a solution, and now we got to define the problem. And I guess the same thing here with the freedom of expression component to this. I'm not quite clear why the academic freedom is very clear in my mind, and it's even clear here. The freedom of expression part, I'm not quite sure I truly understand what is the issue we're trying to truly address. And I think there's something underneath that isn't being clarified for me. So it seems like there's a solution here to a problem. I quite haven't figured out what's the problem we're trying to find the solution to. I haven't heard from anyone saying we're not being allowed to express ourselves, whether it be faculty or students. And especially, President Milner, you're concerned about students. So I'm trying to figure out what is it that we're trying to reaffirm on that front, that we're in need of this kind of a resolution. I sense that within the university, the academy, that students have relatively free to express themselves. Jokingly, last night I was with a couple of our Regent colleagues, we were talking about how free students express themselves at football games. Not much complaint there. And so that's what's very troublesome to me, is that we're seeing, again, no problem with the academic freedom. I think that's very clear, that's been stated over and over. It's this part of the expression part that bothers me. And again, I'm not quite sure I know what is it we're trying to fix, or we're trying to make sure it doesn't get worse or it doesn't get whatever. And I guess as a result of that vagueness, at least in my mind, I don't feel that I can support this resolution, because we're trying to fix something, at least as I'm interpreting it. I'm not sure I know what is it we're trying to fix.
Regent Bailey.
Couple things to think about. Know that as the chair of the tenure task force, academic freedom and freedom of expression have actually been terms that have come up fairly regularly. As the chair of your task force, it's my hope to try to get to the education committee in February my report on tenure, and then hopefully to the full board in March. So one of my thoughts is, in December is a perfect time for us to take up this issue, because we can deal with this issue. The committee will be taking up tenure in February, and then hopefully the full board in March. So because since it's been a theme of those discussions that have come up through members of the task force, I think this is probably the ideal time. So by doing it in succession, we have an opportunity not to have to do everything in one meeting versus we'll do freedom of expression now. In February, the committee takes up tenure. In March, we're going to be talking about academic freedom and tenure again. So I think the timing actually works out better just based on the in-depth meetings and discussions that I've had with task force members when I started the process in June.
Regent Langness.
Thank you, Madam President. When reading this resolution, the first thing that popped into my head is when those who choose to get married, when they reaffirm their vows, I saw this as a very similar context. And much like a couple might reassure their love and their commitment for each other, I see this as the university system reaffirming our principles of academic freedom and freedom of expression that is infused in the history of this university, the state, and the Constitution of this United States. And I urge my colleagues to support this resolution.
Other questions, comments? All right, I think it's time that discussion is at an end. Motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, aye.
Could I clarify?
Yes.
There was an amendment to the original language, wasn't there?
No, there was
Or
not.
just expanding the knowledge of it?
No, there was
The
no.
resolution that went through the committee yesterday
Yeah.
has
That's what
not
we're voting
been
on,
amended.
not any of the language that.
No.
Right.
It was
Just wanted to
background. It
clarify
was
that.
purely background.
Thank you.
Purely background.
Thank you.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Thank you very much for a good discussion. And thank you, Regent Pruitt, Regent Vasquez, Regent Whitburn, Regent Langness, Regent Bailey, thank you, and Regent Higgins, thank you for the discussion. We're going to move on to business and finance. Regent Mueller.
Thank you, Madam President. The Business and Finance Committee met yesterday afternoon. We reaffirmed the investment policy statement for the UW System Trust Funds. This is a required update periodically, and there were no substantial revisions made to the document. But the committee did make more substantive changes to the proxy voting policy documents governing the voting of proxy proposals associated with the UW System Trust Fund investments. You may recall we have about $500 million in funds under management. And we were presented with a lengthy report that provided history and options and recommendations for moving forward. And the recommendation that was adopted is similar to what the State of Wisconsin Investment Board uses. Many of you know the Investment Board is a big player in the institutional investment market. And so we would conform to that. It would discontinue the practice under this policy of bringing individual proxy votes before the board, but it would continue our long history of involvement and engagement in shareholder proxy voting. And there's also an important inclusion in the document that says that they will be reporting back on how this is working. That was unanimously approved also. We were busy looking at Regent policy documents because we also looked at one and analyzed the proposal related to contracts, approval, signature authority, and reporting. And the resolution that was approved increases the threshold requiring board approval from $500,000 to $1 million. That threshold has not been adjusted for many years. It requires formal board approval for athletic employment contracts with a value of more than $500,000. And it requires the UW System Office of General Counsel to review all contracts with a value between $500,000 and $1 million, now that we're increasing that threshold. Next, as was alluded to, the committee approved a new differential tuition proposal by UW Stevens Point. This is being phased in, but it will result in the additional payments by students, undergraduates, of $200 per semester. And does include an opt-out provision for the campus, and we will be presented with an analysis of how it's working, at least within the next 5 years. We approved an alumni tuition proposal from UW-Eau Claire. This is a pilot and will charge a rate that is 25% below the undergraduate resident tuition rate at the institution for those graduates who've met a 4-year graduation rate requirement. The goal of this pilot simply is that, to increase the number of students at UW-Eau Claire who are graduating within 4 years. We considered a number of policy documents related to information systems and technology. The purposes were met long ago, or there was some out-of-date language. So we made a number of changes, including revising the definition of high-risk projects, clarifying what reports are required to be submitted to the Board of Regents and to the Legislature's Joint Committee on Information Technology. And we specifically incorporated some statutorily required reporting elements into the Regent policy documents. We approved 2 contracts for less than $1 million, but of course this predated our increase in the threshold. One is with UW-Madison's agreement with the company Novartis. It's an evaluation of the safety and efficacy of specified treatments addressing leukemia. And additionally, we approved a master services agreement between UW-Madison and the firm IDX. That involves training and certification of image recording. Both will be over $500,000 for the life of the agreement. We approved a collective bargaining agreement with the Building and Trades Council of South Central Wisconsin. As you know, the collective bargaining units can only negotiate on base wages under the terms of Act 10, and that was done. And they negotiated a 0% increase in base wages, but as we were told, kept that dialogue continuing between the trade association and the employer, the university system. There are several reports that I would call your attention to that we heard about, and there are in your materials, and I won't go into detail, but in my view they're very important, and certainly the view of my colleagues. One is on faculty and staff base salary adjustments, and another is on lump sum payments. The issue of faculty and staff salary is something that we are concerned about. This provides some needed information on what campuses have done to reallocate existing funding. No new funding has been provided to provide base salary adjustments and lump sums. It's interesting data, needs to be compared to what has been done in other years. Not surprisingly, the amounts dedicated to this purpose actually declined in fiscal year 14-15 compared to the year before. Funds, again, are being reallocated to the tune of about $57 million. But as you look across the campuses, there are widespread disparities in terms of how many campuses are able even to do this. So I hope this is something, and it is something, that the Business and Finance Committee will continue to review in the months ahead. We received, as we typically do, a summary of gift grants and contracts award for the first quarter. That too had decreased slightly, particularly with federal awards, which decreased about $3 million. Vice President for Administration David Miller provided a brief update on our HRS system, the upgrade plans. We have a fiscal effect of about $9 million in terms of needed upgrades, and that was considered and discussed by the committee. And then finally, Interim Vice President for Finance Julie Gordon shared a revised financial management report for 14-15. And this too is in your folder, and I ask you to look at that carefully. We talk about basic accountability metrics, but this is a basic accountability base amount. And unfortunately, the 14-15 budget that was presented to us and the actual expenditures were inaccurate. And so in our folders, you have a restated amount. And we need to look at that as we look forward to comparing it to our 15-16 expenditures and to our plans to request or at least consider additional funding for the next biennium. So I really encourage you to look at that correction and restatement. So with that, Madam President and members, I now move adoption of Resolution 12A, 12B, 12C, 1 and 2, which are those proxy voting and investment documents. Resolution 12D, 12E, 12F, 12G, 1 and 2, and 3, which are the technical matters relating to information technology projects. 12H and I, which are the UW-Madison contractual agreements. 12J, the bargaining agreement. I move adoption of those resolutions.
Second. Second. Is there any discussion or questions? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Regent Mueller. And moving on to, I believe we are now going to Regent Grebe and the audit report.
Thank you, President Milner. The Audit Committee had a productive meeting yesterday as we continue to develop best practices for our internal audit function. We began by noting our appreciation for the various campuses' continuing cooperation in the audit process, and we emphasized the importance of ensuring that the audit plan is effectively completed and that the action items that arise from those audits are addressed, followed up on, and tracked. We briefly reviewed the audit reports that were issued since the last meeting, including 3 audits related to LTE matters for UW colleges, UW Extension, and UW Whitewater, an audit related to the Confucius Institute at UW Platteville, and an audit related to physical security and access for UW Extension. We discussed in more detail the audit of UW-Madison related to compliance with the system's processes related to payroll and leave accounting, personnel entry, new hires, and terminations. We had a robust discussion of matters related to that audit, including especially concerns related to a lack of documentation of completed I-9 forms and background checks. Vice Chancellor Darrell Bazell and Assistant Vice Chancellor Bob Lavinia discussed their plans to address the audit comments and describe actions taken to date. Lori Stortz briefly reviewed the status of audits that were approved as part of the fiscal year 2016 audit plan. Approximately half of the planned audits have been commenced, and with one exception that I'll note in a moment, all fiscal year 2016 audits are scheduled to be completed on time. Ms. Stortz noted that 2 audits related to cybersecurity and data privacy will not be completed this year due to the fact that there are no system-level cybersecurity and data privacy policies and standards. The committee noted the fact that since the nature of an audit is to review current processes against existing policies and standards, when those policies and standards don't exist, it's not possible to complete an audit. The committee noted that cybersecurity and data privacy are matters of very significant concern and asked Ms. Stortz to work with President Cross to identify strategies for engaging all of our institutions across the system to work together to address this critical situation and develop a coherent system policy. We also discussed the so-called 3 lines of defense model as developed by the Committee on Sponsoring Organizations through the Treadway Commission, which clarifies the roles and duties within an organization to further enhance the understanding of risk management, including especially the need to identify and maintain segregated duties for each of operating management, leadership, and independent audit. COSO, and in particular the Treadway Commission, is considered the gold standard within the audit industry. Ms. Stortz has shared the model with the chief business officers, controllers, chancellors, and the President's cabinet. Ms. Stortz provided a brief update on the hotline, noting that there were no instances of fraud or theft and that no formal personnel actions were taken as a result of any incidents reported. Finally, Ms. Stortz reported that Amanda Namer has accepted the open audit director position for UW-Madison. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments to Regent Grebe? I will. I'm going to bold something. You talked about the cybersecurity and the data security. I want to particularly bold that. I'm not asking a question, but I don't want it to just go into the general reporting. That is critically important, and the idea that there are no policies or standards in place to audit is troublesome. So we all, I'm sure, would expect that we'll be able to manage that.
Agreed, and the committee did have a very robust discussion.
I imagine they did.
Around that topic.
I imagine they did. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Regent Greavy. Regent Many-Deeds, would you please report on the capital planning?
My pleasure. Capital Planning and Budget Committee first approved the minutes of the October 8th, 2015 committee meeting and also unanimously approved the following 9 resolutions. First one, 1.3B, brought by UW-Madison requesting authority to petition for $5 million of funding from the Vilas Trust and to support the music performance building project. This new music performance facility, which will be called the Hamill Music Center, will include a 662-seat concert hall, a 325-seat recital hall, a large rehearsal room, and a state-of-the-art audiovisual with state-of-the-art audiovisual capabilities. The next resolution, 1.3C, brought by the system, requested authority to construct 3 all-agency maintenance and repair projects totaling $6 million. These address facility maintenance and repairs at UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee. Next, we had a series of resolutions, 1.3D1 through 1.3D6. We reviewed various Regent policy documents that relate to capital planning and budgeting and approved the updating, the revising of several policies, the elimination of obsolete ones, and the identification of a new policy to guide building program planning and approval. The last resolution that we approved was Resolution 0.13E, requests the approval of the criteria for ranking building projects. These criteria have been updated to reflect current statewide initiatives, priorities, and goals of the boards of regents. And they're intended to use to create a priority list of projects that addresses the greatest needs, the highest academic priorities, and the most cost-efficient solutions to establish facility deficiencies. We also received a report from Alex Rowe regarding the results of our Executive Committee teleconference held December 1st to consider 4 capital planning and budget committee items in a timely manner so they could go to the Building Commission at its December 9th meeting, and those were all approved thanks to that action by the Executive Committee. That concludes my report, but I would ask that you approve resolutions 1.3B through 1.3E.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? I also want to thank the Executive Committee for participating. That really helped the capital planning to get things done in a timely way. All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, Regent Higgins, would you give us a report on the actions taken by the Ready Committee?
Thank you, Regent Milner. President Ray Cross presented his vision to continue development of the talent pipeline and support Wisconsin's expanding workforce needs by providing programmatic and institutional support to encourage every UW system junior and senior to have at least one business experience before graduation. The ultimate goal will be to pave a pathway for UW system to begin the leading higher educational enterprise in making workforce readiness a reality for all students. Mark Hogan, newly appointed CEO and Secretary for Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, made remarks about the UW-WEDC partnership that touched on important programs and outcomes of state-led economic development efforts. He also offered to meet with chancellors to further expand collaboration efforts. Arjun Sangha, Executive Director of WISES, gave an update on the organization's plan to expand its reach across the system. He talked about the newly appointed WISES student ambassadors, whose presence has expanded to 10 campuses, the record attendance at the 2015 Wisconsin Science and Technology Symposium, and the significant growth of disclosure activity from UW campuses over the past year. As chair of the selection committee, Regent Mark Tyler provided an update of the Regents Scholar Award program for 2016. The Regents Scholar Award Selection Committee, comprised of 6 members from both UW system and the private sector, is reviewing a record 34 applications. The committee will award 3 grants of up to $50,000 each, with final award decisions being made by the end of the year. The award recipients will be honored at the 2016 February Ready Committee meeting. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Regent Higgins? Thank you very much for your good work. I believe that completes our reports for our committee work.
Yeah.
We're going to be moving into a presentation and a discussion regarding student debt and financial aid. Access and affordability are longtime cornerstones of the UW system educational mission. As nearly daily news stories remind us, however, the average cost of a college education is rising, and so is student debt. Recognizing what a significant challenge this presents, new proposals to tackle the problem regularly seem to appear, both at the federal and at the state level. At the UW, we are committed to making sure that the college education we provide is affordable to students both when they attend college and after they complete their education. As a board, we need to keep student debt in mind as we look at future tuition rates, funding for our financial aid programs, and overall affordability issues. Today's presentation will provide a closer look at context, misconceptions, and strategies to address this important topic, and we hope provide a foundation for our future discussion on how our students will pay for college and how we fund our institutions. Essentially, how we're going to minimize the cost of education by various ways, and there are various ways. Here to lead the presentation are Kathy Sayhoff, Director of Financial Aid and Student Work Experience at UW-Eau Claire. Nice to see you again. And Bob Yokish, Senior Policy Advisor for Financial Aid and Student Success at UW System Administration. Let's begin.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today on student debt and financial aid. We hope that we will provide you with information that will be helpful as you look at future issues with student affordability and funding for the UW system. I do want to thank Kevin Welch and Kelly Campbell and the Office of Policy Analysis and Research for all the work they did in pulling together this information. Wonderful. Our presentation today will cover 5 major areas: clarifying student debt and financial aid misconceptions, financial aid 101, how does it work? What is the UW system doing to address student debt? What is going on at the federal and state level? And what can be done to address student debt in the UW system? Our first area is clarifying student debt and financial aid misconceptions. I'm sure you are like me and hear a number of statements from public officials and others regarding student debt and financial aid. Some of these are misconceptions. We hope that we can clarify some of these areas. Before we get into some of these misconceptions, we do want to share some basic facts on student debt in the UW system. As you can see from this first slide, the percentage of Wisconsin resident undergraduate students with student loans at graduation has increased from 62% in 2001-2 to 74% in 2014-15. During the same period, cumulative debt at graduation of Wisconsin resident undergraduate students has increased from 16,057 to 30,650. In comparison to national averages, we are about the same as the national averages on both the percentage of students who graduate with debt and the average debt per borrower. I do want to note that we compare very favorably with the national average on 3-year default rates. The default rate listed is the percent of students who default as a percentage of the total number who enter repayment in 2012. It is important to note that the national average includes all types of higher education institutions, including private for-profit institutions. Default rates for public 4-year institutions nationally was 8.9% in fiscal year 2011 for federal student loans. You will default if you have not made a payment in more than 270 days. So our first of 5 misconceptions that you may hear is that a large percentage of UW students are graduating with 6-figure loan debt. If you read the news articles on student debt, you often read about students who have 6-figure debt at graduation and the problems they have in paying off that loan. The news often notes how they may default on the loan, will never be able to afford a house, and be paying off the loan into retirement. For the UW system, the reality is that 0.3% of our resident undergraduates have cumulative debt over $100,000 at graduation. This is in no way to minimize the impact of student debt on our graduates, but if we look at the distribution of cumulative student debt for 2014-15, we see that most students are around the average of $30,650. A second misconception is that students are staying in school longer because of easy access to student loans. The statements go something like, when I was a student, we all worked our way through college and graduated in 4 years. Now students have easy access to loans and hang around forever and have a good time. This is one of those myths that we have had to address. We had members of Congress state this, and we shared information to show that it is not correct. As the table shows, both 4-year and 6-year graduation rates have increased substantially since the 1980s in the UW system. The 4-year graduation rate for students entering as freshmen in fall 1981 was 18.9%, and the 6-year graduation rate was 51.5%. For students entering as freshmen in fall 2008, the 4-year graduation rate increased to 30.3%, and the 6-year graduation rate increased to 66.2%. And for the fall 2010 cohort, the 4-year graduation rate is 32.6%. A third misconception is that too many students use student loans to live high and buy fancy cars. Let me assure you that student need is quite real. So this is one of my favorite tables for showing what need looks like across the UW system. The table shows that average unmet need after grants and scholarships is almost $10,000 for students with need. That is also after EFC, or estimated family contribution. What this means is that the average student with need has to come up with $10,000 a year from loans and work. If you think about that, you should not be surprised that our average cumulative debt at graduation is over $30,000. I also want to note that there are limits to the amount of federal loans that students can receive. These limits vary by year and whether they are dependent or independent. First-year dependent students are able to borrow $5,500 annually with $3,500 in subsidized loans, with the aggregate loan limit at $31,000 for dependent students, with $23,000 of that in subsidized loans. I also want to note that the number of UW system students with high need has increased significantly since 2001-2. If we look at resident undergraduate students with 0 EFC, that is students whose expected family contribution is 0, and are students with the most need, the numbers have increased from 9,312 in 2001-2 to 21,373 in 2014-15, an increase of 130%. Another measure of students with high need is Pell-eligible students. For 2015-16, the maximum expected family contribution is $5,198 for federal Pell grant recipients. Pell-eligible students have increased by 68% from 23,827 in 2001-2 to 40,125 in 14-15. A fourth misconception we often hear is students with higher debt have higher default rates. More debt leads to more default. The federal research shows that the higher the debt burden, the lower the default rate. Those with burdens above $100,000 had the lowest default rate at 17.6%. The likely reasons for this are that individuals with small loan balances did not finish their education. Many borrowers with large loan balances are people who graduated from master's programs and professional schools who typically end up with higher salaries. It is far better to be a bachelor's degree graduate with $30,000 in loans than a dropout who owes $10,000. This chart shows that there is significant difference in the loan default rate for students who graduated versus students who did not graduate. For those entering repayment in 2011-12, 24% of those who did not graduate defaulted, while 9% of graduates defaulted. So what else is going on here? There are a number of student loan repayment programs, including both a standard 10-year repayment plan and income-based repayment programs, some of which can have payments as low as $5 a month. Kathy and I sat in a recent presentation by a loan service agency, the Great Lakes Higher Education Corporation, on these various repayment programs. They reported that basically there is no reason for loan default anymore under these loan repayment options. So why are there so many defaults? As I said, default occurs if there is no payment for 270 days, and after 270 days, the loan is turned over to the federal government for collection. The presenter from the Great Lakes Higher Education Corporation said that over 60% of defaulters never responded to inquiries from service agencies. A fifth and final misconception on student debt is that because of student debt, college is no longer a good return on investment. We hear this mentioned quite often. If you look at the national data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there is a significant difference by educational attainment in both the unemployment rate and median weekly income. Bachelor's degree recipients have an unemployment rate of 3.5% in 2014 as opposed to 6% for high school graduates, while median weekly income is $668 for high school graduates versus $1,101 for bachelor's degree recipients. Kathy Saloff, Director of Financial Aid and Student Work Experience at UW-Eau Claire, will now provide a summary on how financial aid works.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to speak briefly about how the eligibility process works and give you some actual illustrations of financial aid awards. And initially, the formula for determining financial need looks deceptively easy and straightforward. Cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals financial need. As they say, though, the devil is in the details on this. The costs for developing the costs of attendance involve components that are dictated by Congress. Those 5 components have to be used by every school in developing their cost of attendance. Tuition and fees, room and board, transportation, books and supplies, miscellaneous living expenses, buying shampoo, doing laundry, going for a pizza once in a while. All schools have to include these components, but at an individual school, a student could have different costs of attendance. The student's part-time versus full-time. The student's in-state versus a non-resident. If they're living on campus or in an apartment or living with their folks and commuting to school, they'll have a different cost of attendance at the same school. And then different schools have different costs of attendance. Again, each one of these schools have to use those 5 components, but primarily differences in tuition and differences in cost of living wherever the school is located end up developing different costs of attendance. The formula, though, is cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals need. That basic expected family contribution stays the same no matter where the student goes. So with that formula, the student will have different eligibility for financial need depending on the cost of attendance at the different schools. There are elements, though, that stay the same. The basic financial federal grant, the Pell Grant, stays the same essentially wherever the student goes. It doesn't increase based on higher costs. Within the UW system, the Wisconsin grant within the UW system stays the same no matter which school within the UW system the student goes to. And the chart that Bob showed you about loan limits, those loan limits also stay the same no matter what school the student attends. The second factor in the formula, the expected family contribution, again, is dictated by Congress. It's the basic eligibility concept for federal and state financial aid. The student, and if the student is a dependent student, their parents need to report income, taxes paid, the number of people in the household, of those people in the household, how many are in college, and the assets. The assets, though, exclude home equity, exclude small business or farm equity, exclude retirement accounts. So it's just the assets above and beyond that. A dependent student, the student is considered dependent and must continue to report parent information until they're 24, a graduate student, married, a veteran. If they're unmarried, if they have dependents of their own, a single parent, or if they're an orphan or ward of the court. Otherwise, they need to report parent information as part of the formula.
Kathy?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Maybe I missed it. How could that UW College's cost of attendance be the same as UW Eau Claire on the prior slide?
It's pretty close.
Yeah, I missed it.
That's the figures we have. The tuition, what I guess is on there, is tuition and fees are less at UW colleges, but the colleges are, cost of living might be reflective of cost of living in Madison versus cost of living in.
So everything's rolled into that.
Pardon?
Everything's rolled into that number.
Correct, I'm
It's
sorry,
missed
all
on
five
tuition.
components.
Yes.
All 5 components, right.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. This particular example shows how that formula might work, how that calculation works. This assumes a family of 4, one student in college. Parents' combined income is $52,000. Their assets above and beyond home equity and a retirement account would be $45,000 in this example. The student earned $4,500 last year and has about $500 in savings. That expected family contribution in this example would be just right around $3,500, to just give you some context. So again, the cost of attendance at a particular school, and then the cost of attendance for that student at that particular school, whether the student is part-time, full-time, living with parents, living on campus, minus that expected family contribution, which stays the same no matter what school they go to, determines that student's eligibility for financial aid. What we're going to do then is look at a couple of examples of actual financial aid awards. I'm using UW Eau Claire, so I'm using our cost of attendance. And this would be for actual awards for 15-16, our current academic year. We're assuming a family of 4, one in school, and in the first example, that student comes from a family where the parents' combined income was $37,000. That expected family contribution in the formula would be 0 family contribution. So with that formula, Eau Claire's cost of attendance of $19,670 minus 0, that student has a need of $19,670. We've given that student $57.75 in Pell Grant. I'm sorry, the part I forgot to mention here is we're assuming these students were on top of everything. These students met every priority deadline, including the fact that while they were in high school, they did all the steps they needed to do to qualify for the Wisconsin Covenant Grant. So they come in, yes?
How do they know that?
How did they know how to qualify for
When do they find out in high school this is what they're supposed to be doing to qualify for what you just said?
For the Covenant Grant?
Yeah.
That would have been, that we would have relied heavily on the high school counselors to educate students about that. What I going to have to show us in our next slide is that the covenant grant is no longer an option for students. And so it's part of the illustration I'm going to show you. But they would have had to sign up for being interested in the grant in 8th grade, and then there were some steps they had to take throughout high school in order to remain eligible for it, and they had to meet some deadlines in their senior year. So these students were really on top of it. About 25 to 30% of incoming words at Eau Claire qualified this year for the Wisconsin Covenant Grant. So not everybody gets it.
So they really knew about it. And you're saying from 8th grade on, there's a big portion,
there was
they qualify or
heavy
not, that didn't even know about it, that they were supposed to be working on it.
I would say there was a fairly heavy information blitz to those students and their parents with the Wisconsin Covenant.
In 8th grade?
In 8th grade and through high school, when this was a program.
Do you have any sense of what a percentage is of students that are as well prepared as you just said? And let me get to my point. My point is, how does that affect first generation students? How does it affect students in true poverty that don't have any other support systems? I think in my family's case, I think we were very helpful to our son because we had already gone through college. And so we knew a lot of things that he needed to do way in high school. You got to meet this deadline, you got to write this, you got to apply here, you got to do this. I don't think that kind of support is there for you're going to be a first generation student. So how often is that? Is that 80% of all our students are that well prepared? Is it 30%? Do you have any sense of that?
I can't give you a percentage. I know that it's impossible for us to give students too much information and too much support for this, that we're attempting to do that through various access programs. Great Lakes has an access program. BPI has lots of really robust access programs. At Eau Claire, we have a program called Legal Beginnings that reaches out to try to get that message through, that this is what the steps you need to do to access higher education. Unfortunately, especially for students that don't have those really strong parent support avenues, I think that they tend to miss some of the deadlines, which then tends to erode some of the resources they can have.
Let me just add that our financial aid offices across the system do a lot of work, certainly, in trying to help students with filling out the financial aid applications. We have College Go Wisconsin that is a statewide event, but also individual financial aid offices go around to high schools and volunteer their time to go and help students, first generation students with that. Also, on Regent Farrell's question on the covenant, ideally, when this program was created, there's no reason that almost all of our freshman resident students shouldn't be receiving the covenant. But as you say, the percentage is much, much smaller than that just because of the challenges of getting the word out on this. But the program is coming to an end.
If I could just follow up, I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is I think most definitely we're going to see more need for help because I think we're going to see more first generation students coming into our universities. And in particular, definitely we're going to see more students of color that are going to come, and they're going to be first generation. So I wish we could become more aware of not only, I hear what you're saying, and I see it, like in Milwaukee, there are several little branch programs that I see where they're trying to help students. But I'm just curious as to whether there's even enough presence out there in the communities to help students so that they don't miss those deadlines.
From my perspective, even though there is much out there and we can point to programs, it's not enough. If we've got anybody slipping through the cracks, then it's not enough. So what I'd maybe point out here, so this is an award in 2015-16, this current year, and this high-need student with a zero family contribution is being awarded $12,000 in gift assistance through the Pell Grant in this case, the Covenant grant, Wisconsin grant, supplemental grant is another federal grant, and then the Blue Gold tuition differential grant. We would have given the student a reasonable work-study award and then awarded the maximum Stafford loan that's available for first-year students. That's that $3,500 plus that $2,000. $3,500 is subsidized and $2,000 an unsubsidized loan, and another $600, $671 in Perkins loan to meet that student's full need. So this student's need would be met. This student would have funding to meet all those components of that cost of attendance. The second example is a middle income student. Family of four, one in school, parents earn a combined $69,000. The formula would calculate $5,500 in a parent contribution for that student. So that student's need at Eau Claire would be about $14,000. The student would be eligible for $1,000 under the Covenant program, and we would have awarded the student another $900 in our Blue Gold tuition grant. So $1,900 in gift assistance. The student is a first-year student, so we could not award them more than the total of $5,500 in Stafford loan, $35,000 plus $2,000 on sub. We would have awarded this. We would have offered the student a reasonable work-study award, and then our maximum Perkins award, another subsidized loan program for $33,000. As you can see, even awarding the student all of the aid that we would have available, that middle-income student's need is unmet by $2,200. In 2015-16.
Regent Mueller.
Yes, thank you. If I could interrupt, what is the interest rate for the subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans? And does that interest begin to accrue immediately, or is it deferred until after graduation?
The interest rate on the current subsidized loans for the Stafford loan is 4.29%. They change interest rates often, so I brought my key. The difference between a subsidized and unsubsidized, is that what you asked about?
Yes. What is the interest rate for the unsubsidized as well?
The rate is the same. The difference is in a subsidized loan, that interest doesn't accumulate while the student is not in repayment. So the whole time they're in school and during their grace period, their 6-month grace period, there's no interest rate accumulating on it. So if they take out $4,000, when they start to repay, they're repaying $4,000. And then the interest rate starts to accumulate. With an unsubsidized loan, the interest rate starts to accumulate after it's dispersed. The student doesn't have to pay it. So the loan doesn't have to start into repayment until after their grace period. But once they start into repayment, it's the amount borrowed plus the interest rate. Some students choose to pay off the interest rate along the way, just so that when they have the loan finally repaid, they haven't accumulated that interest rate, but it's not a requirement.
Over here, Kathy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I think she's on Mark.
Go ahead.
I had a question on the WEG loan. I know in the technical college system, we run out of those funds way before eligible need has been met, to the tune of $25–30 million. So early in the year, even though you're eligible, funds are no longer available. So I guess the question I've got here, is that the same scenario with you, or is it not as bad, or is this a best case scenario?
It's a best case scenario. Again, these two students did everything right, met early award deadlines, filed early, so that this is an early applicant. We do run out of funding historically, eventually, in the Wisconsin grant, the WEG, but it goes a little bit further than what's experienced in the technical colleges.
Actually, a lot further. We're very fortunate, but we did make decisions over the last 5 years to try to address the wait list and decrease the amount of our awards in order to spread the dollars we have further. So as of last year, we only had a wait list of 1,300 students, which is a lot better than they used to be. And over that same time period, we've increased our awards to about 34,000 awards from about 25,000. So we made a conscious decision, the financial aid directors working with the president, made a conscious decision to get awards to more people so that as of this year, we don't even have a waiting list. So we're pleased with that, certainly.
We're pleased with it, but I have to talk about the Sophie's Choice portion of it, is that the decision that we made was not to keep pace with costs by increasing the grant, the maximum grant amount. So the amount of that grant for a student who's eligible for maximum eligibility at 23-24 has not increased in many years. And so it's sort of the trade-off that we adjust.
I've worked with this before. I'm part of a group that gives some significant scholarships, and I understand the patchwork that needs to go involved. And I also understand that this particular group gives these awards for 4 years. So once you're fixed for 4 years. What about some of these? Are some of these more or less fixed for 4 years? Because I know the work that goes into putting together this patchwork. So what kind of guarantee? I don't want to say guarantee, but what kind of steps are? How's it sequenced?
The Pell Grant, you could actually continue to get a Pell Grant for up to 6 years, equivalent of 12 semesters. The Covenant is available for 4 years, I believe.
That's right.
The Wisconsin grant, the WEG, is 6 years, 8 semesters. I'm not.
That's all right.
positive.
You don't have to go. You don't have to go into detail. But when, for example, do you have to do a resubmission of your parents'?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what I mean.
I'm sorry.
You can get it, but you have to resubmit the information.
Yes.
Thank you.
We use the federal, the FAFSA for the Wisconsin grant also. So when a student reapplies each year through the FAFSA, that is used for determining how much they're going to get for the Wisconsin grant.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me. The Perkins loan program I know has been under scrutiny. So can you give us an update on, where that program is and the impact long term?
So the Perkins loan program officially ran out on October 2015, I believe. And we are continuing to work with our congressional delegation to try to get an extension on the program. There is a push by some in Congress to consolidate the loan programs, and that's one of the reasons Senator Alexander and others who are taking a lead on this issue have been hesitate to extend it, but we do have hope, as President Cross, I believe, was saying, that there may be some movement in getting the program extended for a couple of years. And I think, as you can see in this chart right here, the Perkins Loan Program plays an important role in meeting our student needs, so we certainly are pushing hard to continue this program. I will add also that this is one program where the institutions put in money. About 30% of the funding for Perkins comes from the institutions, so it's a bit of a matching program too.
Just to follow up on that, Region Hall, Senator Alexander, excuse me, has agreed to a change. We just don't have the details of it yet, so an extension. The question is, what form will it take? What will it look like? So that's very positive, and I commend a number of our folks for really aggressively pressing this. Wisconsin was a leader in the country in making this change happen.
Good. Thank you. Regent, that's fine.
Jose was fine.
You should hear what I ran through.
This is all public, federal, state. Where does the private scholarship, how does that get into any of this? And how
how does that affect either positively or negatively with your sharing with us?
Private scholarships, so I don't know across the system, but at Eau Claire we have $2 million in private scholarships, not above and beyond our foundation scholarships that are awarded to our students. If a student gets a scholarship, then without question, that's used to replace what we call self-help. So unless the student prefers to reduce their work study, the first thing we're going to reduce is the loan if they get a private scholarship. So a student would have to, that student would have to replace all the loan and all the work study before a private scholarship would impact any grant assistance. And then we'd work with the student to see if they had increased costs that we could increase the budget for before we reduce grant. Did that answer your question? The next slide is directly related to this conversation, that unless something happens, and hot off the presses, I'm thrilled to hear that it looks more optimistic than it did maybe last week. We are losing in 16-17 the ability to award our incoming freshmen any Perkins grant, any Perkins loan. And coupled with that, 16-17 is the first year that Wisconsin Covenant will not be available to any of the incoming freshmen coming in. And that double whammy, you can see that the student from very low income, high need student with a 0 EFC without additional resources, because we're not expecting increases in the Pell Grant. We're not expecting increased dollars in the Wisconsin grant. And there are no increases in the limits, the yearly limits in the Stafford loan program. We are looking at not being able to meet that basic need of that very high need 0 EFC student. And look at that middle income student, that unmet need of $6,200. So that's part of the reason why you can tell we fought so hard and passionately for that Perkins loan program. Any questions before I move on to initiatives at the school system?
A quick question. For either of those students, that Blue Gold grant is a very nice thing to have.
Yes.
What's the source of funds for the Blue Gold grant?
That's from our tuition differential funds. That's an incredibly important tool for us, and just as important, there's funds from that same source that we use for special circumstances. And so we have a pot of money where when a student comes to a financial aid counselor and has special circumstances, we document that, but then we have resources. We don't have to only offer that student loan. We have resources that we can help a student whose parents have just discovered that the mom has cancer or have lost employment or any of those circumstances. Okay. And we were going to talk just really briefly. Bob asked me to talk about the initiatives. What's the UW system doing now to address student debt? And you have a handout of those initiatives at different schools, so I'm just going to do some highlights of that. Essentially, the most important, besides the basics that every school has to do, which is the, oh, they don't have the handout?
They do.
Okay. Thank you. Besides the absolute basics of every student who takes out a loan has to go through entrance counseling and exit counseling. Besides those, historically, the UW system has done a step of active acceptance of the loans. That means that the student has to go into the system and they're offered a loan, but then they have to look at that loan and either formally accept it or reject it. And if they accept it, then they're welcome to go in and not accept that full loan. Interestingly, Indiana University implemented that step a few years ago and got national publicity for reducing their average loan indebtedness in Indiana. And lo and behold, we had been doing that practice for years. And so I think that's one of the most important things that we've done as a system. Several of our schools have various levels of financial literacy programs. At La Crosse, they've had for several years now a full-time financial literacy coordinator, and they couple that with 12 peer mentors who talk to students one-on-one and do workshops and presentations. Whitewater intends to hire a full-time financial literacy coordinator in February. Madison has some actual coursework in financial life skills that students can take for credit. And all the other schools link to websites that are, the two primary ones are Cash Course and Grad Ready. And we link to those from our websites, and those are online tutorials that have been especially crafted for college students and the financial literacy issues that affect people in this particular time frame. And students can go through in a self-paced way and take the tutorials. I thought it was interesting, Superior's Bursar and Financial Aid collaborated to create modules, 4 modules that were specifically targeted to understanding your bill and understanding degree progression and budgeting and financial well-being. Eau Claire, in addition to linking to the websites, Eau Claire's done a little bit of a different approach over the last decade. We went in and we've been totally intentional about keeping that cost of attendance. You asked why our cost of attendance was maybe relatively low. And we kept that cost of attendance very conservative. And our rationale for that was that there's no student who is denied grant assistance as a result of that. They receive their full amount of grant they would receive otherwise. But the amount of loan that we offered them up front in that initial award tended to be lower as a result. And we've been willing to do that and then be very assertive with students that if they're having problems making it, come and talk to us. We can increase their cost of attendance if their costs are actually higher. But then we marry that conversation with the discussion that the only thing we can offer you is additional loan. Let's look at how much that's going to cost you by the time you repay it. And are there any other resources that might be another option for you? That seems to have been an effective approach. Eau Claire's average loan indebtedness has been one of the lowest, if not the lowest in the system for multiple years now. So it's just another step that we've tried to take. The other thing Bob asked me to talk about is student employment programs, and as a former student employment coordinator, this is near and dear to my heart. But part-time student employment, especially quality part-time student employment on our campuses, has so many benefits. But one of the main primary benefits, of course, is that students who work can get educational resources paid for and keep their loan indebtedness down. On top of that, when people work on campus, they're creating another connection on campus, and research continues to show over and over again that that's a positive impact on retention. People that work on campus also have the ability to gain skills, but also an understanding of work ethics and work behaviors. And employers continue to tell us, the latest survey just told us again, that that's something they clearly value in college graduates. One survey asked employers, if you had a college graduate with a 4.0 and no work experience and a college graduate with a solid GPA and work experience, which would you choose? And clearly they're looking for the person with some work experience. And then the work on campus in particular allows us to provide services to the campus community above and beyond what we could do without the student employment resources. So.
Let me just say a few words about some of the others on this list here. I think we showed you already the data on the 4-year graduation rates and how we've improved that. We've also, another obviously important area is credits to degree when you're talking about student debt, to the extent that we can limit or decrease the number of credits students take to degree, that obviously can limit student debt. And as you can see on here, from 93, 94, the average credits were 146 credits, and we've decreased that to 137 credits in 2013-14. There was a little bit of a discussion on scholarships, and if you look at the amount of scholarship funding across the UW system, you can see that it has increased significantly over the last several years, and we're quite pleased to see that. That $164 million represents about 12% of total tuition collected from students, thus making education more affordable. And then finally, the last program that we talk about is our programs at a number of institutions to bring students back who are close to graduation but haven't completed their degrees. At UW Whitewater and UW Oshkosh between 2009 and 2012, they had programs to bring students back who were 15 credits short of a degree, to try to get them to complete a baccalaureate degree. And 4 additional institutions, UW Stevens Point, Green Bay, Platteville, and colleges, all worked on the Project Win-Win oriented toward associate degree completion. As far as what is going on in the federal and state level, I think we've talked a little bit now about the Perkins Loan Program ending, and certainly glad to hear if that does indeed go through with the Perkins Loan Program continuing. In addition, on FAFSA simplification, there's been quite a bit of discussion about an issue you brought up, that we want to make it as simple as possible for students to go through the steps necessary to get the aid that they need to complete their education. So there's been a push, Senator Alexander pushed for a very simple 2-question FAFSA, which we certainly had some concerns with, but there's also push by others to simplify the FAFSA. And certainly, while we want to make sure that those students in need are the ones receiving the aid, we do want to make it as simple as possible for students so they're not, especially if they come from first-generation families. On income-based repayment, there's a number of options now for students so that they don't have to just use the basic 10-year repayment model. There are income-based payments options that they can use to help in repaying their loans. And at the same time, there is push to consolidate to make it so that people aren't as confused perhaps by the different repayment options. And finally, on here, there's the 2 years of college free, which I'm sure you've heard a number of groups talking about that on the federal level. And also 2 states, Tennessee and Oregon, have passed legislation to have the first 2 years of community college free for students. So what can be done to address student debt in the UW system? We, of course, need to continue to focus on retention, graduation, and credits to degree, including reducing remedial demand. We have shown you that student debt is especially a problem for those students who do not graduate. The 2015-17 biennial budget included a request for additional funding for the Wisconsin grant, and that continues to be our top priority in financial aid. We do have a few other ideas. We talked a little bit about the Wisconsin Covenant, and as we said, the Wisconsin Covenant is coming to an end, and we should push to keep both the state funds and funds from Great Lakes Higher Education Corporation for UW need-based aid. In 2014-15, Wisconsin Covenant grants totaled over $12 million for UW system students, with maximum grants of $2,500 a year for 4 years. Another idea is to ramp up our work on financial literacy. Kathy talked about that a little bit. We could work with service agencies to create a state-of-the-art financial literacy program for all UW students. A third possibility is to create a new loan program to replace the Perkins Loan Program if it does go away, which we certainly hope not. This could be an important tool to allow our financial aid offices to help meet student need. Another idea is to ramp up the student work program, which Kathy talked about. And finally, anything we can do to help student loan default for graduates and for those students who did not complete college, that would be a tremendous service. We could partner with service agencies to contact former students and make sure they are aware of their financing options and how to avoid default. At the same time, getting students who drop out to return to college and complete their degree is the best solution for those students and their long-term success. At that, let me hand it off to Dave Ward for some closing comments.
Just two brief comments, not surprisingly, from an economic perspective. The first, you've seen in this presentation a formula that says cost of attendance minus the family contribution equals a financial need. In the tradition of economics and economists, I bring you gloom and doom on both factors because cost of attendance has been rising. It's driven by cost of living and in some cases by tuition. On the other end of things, the recovery and the recession of 2007-9, if you look at any of those, have some chance to go back and look at any of those graphs that you see in terms of student loan demand, you can see there's a big jump. So until we get really robust economic activity going, the expectation will be that we'll have weak performance on the family contribution end. But bottom line is, I don't think the financial aid need is going to go away. It may well increase. The second is, at the same time, Bob referenced the value proposition of a college degree. I'm hearing a lot of talk these days about, well, you know, they graduate with $30,000 in credit, they could buy a new car. Well, you could. And in 10 years, your new car would be worth about $1,500. In 10 years, your college degree, on the average, will be worth $20,000 to $30,000 in earning power. So I think it's really important for us to do that sort of perspective, not to say that college is not expensive. It's the second largest expenditure that a student will make behind a house. But the earning potential there is just enormous. And this recovery is creating two kinds of jobs, very low income jobs and very high income jobs. And these middle income jobs are just disappearing. So it's really important. And I've asked a couple of the chancellors to just give very brief perspectives on financial aid from their standpoint. So Chancellor Schmidt and Chancellor Van Galen have volunteered to give you some comments.
Could I just ask a question?
Yeah, yes.
A real quick one before we lose you, the two of you, with your wealth of knowledge. You keep saying this is the loan they have to get. Okay, I'm a college graduate. I couldn't get through it. I mean, this just convinced me you have to have a college degree to get a student finance. Where do they get the loan? Because I've had, now that I'm on this, I'm getting constituent calls again, and I've been called by one that said a credit union wouldn't release the loan payment, the portion of loan to pay for the student's housing, because the school hadn't validated that they were a student at all. I didn't have a clue. And where do they get the money, the loans?
The loan funds, at least the federal loan funds, are awarded through the school.
That I understand.
So we determine, we offer the student the loan. They have to accept the loan. The first time a student receives a loan, they have to go through entrance counseling, and they have to document that, and they have to sign a master promissory note. Those things could all hold up the loan not being dispersed. So
this was a credit union. Where's the credit union?
Oh, the credit union. I'm sorry, I missed that. Credit union, there is a whole array of loans that are educational loans available outside of the federal loan program.
When they look at that deficit, the families can go to those.
Yes.
I mean, the difference.
Yes, correct.
And I'm sure there are going to be other questions for Bob and Kathy. And we are slaves of the clock. So I would encourage you, thank you very much. And David, I know you want to, we have our chancellors and want to have a little conversation, but please, please feel free to make yourself, to talk to Kathy or Bob about this. This is a very important issue, and I appreciate the presentation. It's very good. Yes, gentlemen.
I thought that was a great presentation. I just want to reinforce a couple of points and make one comment. The importance of completion, retention, and graduation is very clear. Oftentimes, this national debate focuses on the debt of our graduates, but I'm even more concerned about our students who do not complete, because they leave our campuses often without a degree and credential and significant debt. And so whatever we're doing in terms of retention of students is critical, involving them in high-impact practices, programs such as student support services. And so I think that's a big set of dots to connect in this conversation. The other thing I'll mention is charitable support, and I think that does have a role to play. If you look at the EW system, I think especially on the comprehensive campuses, 25 years ago, fundraising was a minor part of what we do. It's becoming more and more important. So we have a major focus in our campaign at River Falls on scholarship support. We've raised over $8 million in the last 4.5 years, specifically to support scholarships. And we have the Falcon Scholars Program, which is part of our differential tuition, where we have 80 new freshmen every year who receive $1,000 per year for 4 years. That part is from charitable gift support. And then the differential tuition provides them with an undergraduate research or study abroad experience, $2,000, their junior or senior year. We've looked at retention data for the Falcon Scholars. Those students in that program are retained first and second year between 87 and 89%. Our students with the same academic profile who are not Falcon Scholars are retained about 72 to 74%. So that tells me about the impact of that scholarship support and the promise of a high-impact experience if they are retained at River Falls. So just wanted to share those.
Interesting.
First of all, I want to thank the presenters. Very proud of our own Kathy Sale Office Financial Aid Director. Many of the Regents may not know, but my first job in higher education was as a financial aid director. I really cut my teeth as a student advocate as tuition rates are going up in my own college career, 146% in 4 years. So the notion of student access to quality higher education is really what drives me. And I thought the points raised in the presentation are important. In particular, I think that we need to punctuate that the average student is not graduating from our institution with $100,000. That media coverage, the conversation around that, does more damage to our society, in my opinion. There was just a study out yesterday that said that half of the young people in the country have given up on the American dream. That is a terrible sociological situation we have. We need to be doing things to hit that home first and foremost. We talked a little bit about the Blue Gold Beginnings program, which starts in the 5th grade, and I won't go into great detail on it, but it's a program worth looking into, and it's all about reminding students that they can go on to higher education. And we partner with CBTC, and as a part of bringing those 5th graders, 3,000 of them onto our campus, we also bring them up to CBTC to see the opportunities in the technical college system. I think we need to keep in mind that there's been a significant state disinvestment in our public institutions, and that has been the main reason tuition has gone up. We need to continue to be that voice. When I was a college student, you could work your way through college. I worked 40 hours a week for 2.5 years. It was a mistake. But I, too, was afraid of the debt. We heard a presentation. I appreciate the Regents' support for our initiative, echoing Dean Van Galen's comments, that we must focus on retention. We must focus on those 4-year graduation rates. Preventing a student from going into a 5th year at UW-Eau Claire, we estimate saves them $50,000 by the time you add in tuition and the opportunity costs of not being in the workforce, not being grad school. So my only caution today, I appreciate the topic and I thought it was very educational, but when we focus so much on student debt, we forget some of the other costs involved with not being retained and graduating in 4 years. And again, I have a great deal of respect for the Board of Regents for doing this topic, this kind of focus.
This topic is essential because we have to clear the myths about debt, and at the same time we need to address it because it will only give us more problems in the future. So, thank you very much. Yes, we had, yes.
Oh, I'm
Regent
sorry,
Brewer?
just very briefly, Regent
Yes.
Miller, but following up on what Chancellor Schmidt just said, I would just, as a friendly amendment in terms of what can be done by the UW system, I would suggest maybe adding a bullet advocating for additional GPR funding from the state. 15 years ago, 16, 18 years ago, students and their families paid about 40%, I believe, of their education. Today they're paying in the mid to upper 60s. And I think a part of the the dialogue and the advocacy efforts that this board and we all could do would certainly help that process. So I just would friendly amendment propose that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Regent Delgado.
I would like to make a point. I think there's something missing here. I'm very encouraged by the fact that we're providing some financial literacy going forward. As an engineer, I can guarantee you that. But there's an item that's important. I wonder what it would take for us to do, because on a continuing basis, we should like to forecast in your area of study, annual income, when you graduate, number of jobs, and where the jobs are, or what are the trends. The reason for that is that an analysis that doesn't have income into it in a realistic fashion, it's conservative, is not a good analysis. And I have a job, I'm studying something I love. I look at it as the median salary is $25,000. There's 10,000 jobs, and most of them are downtown Manhattan. Well, I'm not going to borrow too much money, okay, unless my father is very wealthy. So, and by the way, wasn't, he lost everything. So from my perspective, you need that. That component is needed. And my impression is that we should do this on a continuing basis to all of our students. Because my perspective is that that is something will help them to make an intelligent idea. And, you know, they may want to take it home and give their father a heart attack.
Thank you. Now, moving on, thank you very much. We really appreciate your presentation. At this time, we turn our attention to athletics. First, a quick review of what prompted this conversation. 3 years ago, the Board of Regents approved new reporting guidelines calling for UW institutions that participate in NCAA Division I Athletics to annually provide information to the board regarding academic, fiscal, and compliance matters related to NCAA Division I intercollegiate athletics. This accountability framework allows the board to provide proper oversight and safeguard to the well-being and success of our UW system athletes. It also provides an opportunity for us to review the financial viability of a UW athletic program and how they contribute to the institution's academic missions. Through these routine reports, we hope to maintain good lines of communication between institutions, the system president, and this board. The UW system has 3 institutions with Division I NCAA athletic programs: UW Madison, UW Milwaukee, and UW Green Bay. Today we'll hear from UW Green Bay. Leading the presentation will be Chancellor Gary Miller and Mary Ellen Gillespie, UW Green Bay Director of Athletics. Before Chancellor Miller begins, however, I would like to note that he is a member of the NCAA Committee on Infractions, and I understand he's the only sitting chancellor to be appointed to that group. Chancellor Miller?
I'm here.
President,
there you are. I'm going to let Mary Ellen give
Mary
you.
Ellen is there.
Yeah, I'm going to let her give you our 2-hour report. But before we do that, I want to just make 2 brief comments. This is a very challenging time for mid-major NCAA Division I athletics, and it's a challenge to have one of these programs and have a successful one. But I want to emphasize to this board that this is a very, very important part of the University of Wisconsin Green Bay strategy going forward. We are in a part of the country that is very much oriented around sports. Phoenix athletics is well regarded around the country, but it's also highly supported in the community. And so while this is unusual for a comprehensive university to have Division I athletics in Wisconsin, we believe that this is very important for us. I also want to say we have exceptional leadership in Phoenix, in our Phoenix athletic program. Mary Ellen Gillespie, who will give the report, has extensive experience at both the BCS level and the mid-major level. She is a nationally involved NCAA person. She sits on the women's selection committee for the NCAA women's basketball tournament, and our faculty athletic representative has also just been appointed to a national NCAA tournament. So we
we have lots of activity there. And she'll give you the report. And I also think we should be proud that there are only 5% of the Division I athletic ADs in the country are women. 2 of them are in the 3 of the Division I schools in the Wisconsin system. Mary Ellen, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chancellor Miller. I also want to thank President Cross and President Miller for allowing us to come here today. And I want to thank the board for really having an accountability for athletics and wanting to be involved in the progression and the improvement of our departments at the Division I level. I am going to apologize for one thing. I have a terrible eye-watering problem, so I apologize if it's distracting for you. It's 10 times worse for me. So I'm not crying. Believe me, it takes a lot more than that to get me going. But I do want to thank you for the opportunity to come here today. This is my 3rd time in front of this board, but the first time I was 4 days on the job, and so last year I had a full year under my belt and now 2 years under my belt. And I still say very proudly that I have the best job in the world, and that I get to talk about our 16 sports, our 247 student athletes at our Division I institution. And our tagline in our department stays the same. We truly believe that we change lives and we build leaders. And we take that role very seriously at UW Green Bay. A couple of things. I won't go through the entire philosophy, but we take the philosophy of Division I athletics very seriously. And we're thrilled that the board and the education committee supported the new 4-college model at Green Bay, because we do truly believe that athletics plays a role in being the front porch and can help UW Green Bay grow. So we're very, very excited about, and we thank you for that support. Every decision we make is with the student athlete welfare, health, and safety in mind. Every single decision we make, that is at the forefront. Chancellor Miller talks about how important Division I athletics is to Green Bay. It's a young institution. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. We have 30,000 alumni who are proud Phoenix. But you need to know that our community supports and really wants Division I athletics. Our city administration supports it. The Green Bay Packers support it and want it, and they're supporting it in time, talent, and treasure. And so you'll see a little bit later the success that we've had in generating that revenue from that community support. We will win, and we'll win the right way. I stood here last year and said that compliance, values, and ethics are a top priority, and we will win the right way. It is a true testament to how Green Bay seriously takes compliance, and that our chancellor, as President Milner said, is the first time sitting chancellor in the history of the NCAA Committee on Infractions. Unfortunately, as major violations grow across the country, the need to grow the Committee on Infractions gets busier. And so Chancellor Miller is the first time sitting chancellor on such a very busy committee. We develop leaders, and again, we do believe we're the front porch for the institution. We may be about 2.3% of the institutional budget, but over 76% of the regional and national media attention that our institution receives does come through the athletics vehicle. We're a little bit unique at Green Bay in that intramurals, recreation, and the Crest Event Center also fall underneath the athletics umbrella. And what's important about that is, as we play that role of growth for the institution, the Crest Event Center and everything that happens under that roof brings in over 75,000 unique visitors to our campus. So it's not just students and faculty and staff, 75,000 unique visitors to the UW Green Bay campus. The other piece is everything that happens under those 4 walls and the roof, they are the highest rated on the student satisfaction survey every single year at UW Green Bay. So we're truly engaging students, faculty, staff, and the community. Very competitive history. The winning is good. The raising revenue is good. What we take our top priority in is the academics. And we're doing 31 consecutive semesters of a student-athlete GPA above a 3.0. Last semester, spring of 2015, we had the highest student-athlete GPA ever of a 3.3. 55% of our student athletes had above a 3.0, 17% had a perfect 4.0. 14 of our 16 sports teams last spring had a team GPA above a 3.0, and 6 of our teams had a perfect 1,000 APR score. Our graduate student success rates for Green Bay are higher than the Horizon League average, the NCAA average, and the federal average. So we're very, very excited about those statistics. And obviously the athletic competition and successes certainly do play a role in that front porch. So I stood here last year with 1 year under my belt and kind of talked about what I had learned in my first year and what we wanted to do moving forward in my second year, and I call it walking the talk. I promised that we wanted to really address some of what we considered the low-hanging fruit. University of Wisconsin Green Bay has never had an apparel deal. So even from a branding and a visibility issue, we weren't able to really outfit our student athletes in the right equipment, in the right uniforms, and so we're working through a new apparel deal that is very, very successful. We had a seat around the table when the university implemented a pouring rights contract, and so we were able to have a seat and weigh in on that. We're currently working on a media rights deal that will better situate our department's budget. And then we also, last year at this time, we had several vacancies at the senior level in the department and in some of our coaching positions. And so as we peel back layers of the onion with our new folks, we're still growing and setting some course for the vision. I also talked about finding some creative ways to generate revenue. Many of you might know that we went through a men's basketball search last year, and so some of the creative ways are how we're building our coaching contracts. So our new men's basketball coach will need to go on the road a couple of times a year and play what we call guarantee games, and that those campuses that we visit will give us a check that then goes to help our budget. We talked last year about some of our APR scores, especially in men's soccer, and one of the reasons for a lower APR in soccer was because we had so many soccer coaching transitions. And that correlates with APR when you have transitions. So in order to keep coaches, we have actually put buyouts in some of their contracts. So if someone comes calling on our men's soccer coach, if they want him, they have to pay me some money, pay the department money. And so again, that one deters our coaches from leaving, which helps our APR. And number two, helps us put some of that money back in that program's budget. We look to outsource our head athletic trainer position in order to help address some of the crunches to our budget this past year. It's been a tough year for everybody. And then the other piece, hotel agreements for teams. We don't necessarily have contracts, but we know that 16 of our teams go to Horizon League university cities. We go to Detroit, we go to Cleveland, we go to Akron, we go to Dayton, we go to Cincinnati, we go to Chicago, and we know that. We know we go several times a year with all 16 of our teams. So when the budget crunches were really coming, we got on the phone and called hotel chains in those cities. And we said, we can guarantee that we will have this many beds, this many nights throughout the year. And so we get head coaching rooms comped, we get better deals across the board. And so again, saving our budget some money and just being smarter with how we spend. We also promised that we would get better on the external revenue side. And we had the best year in the history of Green Bay Athletics on the fundraising side. For the first time, our cash gifts hit the $1 million mark. And that is a 33% increase. I stood here last year and said, you can't raise money if you don't go out and ask for it. And so we are asking. We are shaking the trees. We're looking under rocks. We are asking for the money. Our Phoenix Packers steak fry that we hold every spring that benefits our entire department, an 82% increase. We went from about $82,000 to $150,000 last April, and we're so excited about that. And then our women's basketball golf outing for the first time hit 6 figures. I'll talk a little bit about women's basketball in a little bit and the success of that program. But I also think it's important to know these are the constituents that a Division I athletics program serves, and they need to work with. And I also call upon these constituents as part of our village and that it takes a village to graduate students and student athletes. And so we work with all these folks in order to elevate and take our department to the next level. But we also know we're responsible to these folks for doing things the right way and following through on commitments. Challenges, several are the same as last year. Finances continue to be a challenge. We do have the smallest budget in the league. We did go through budget cuts just like everybody else. It's been a tough year for everybody, but I want to let you know the 4 guiding principles that we worked through when it came time to make some cuts and adjustments. Number 1 was we will not compromise on the health and safety of our student athletes. Number 2, we will keep gender equity and be compliant with Title IX. Number 3, we need to keep men's and women's basketball as competitive as possible, because when your men's basketball team makes it to the NCAA tournament, there is a payout. And the payout is big in that it makes an incredible dent for our budget. And then number 4, we would not cut any areas that drive revenue. So we did not cut ticket sales, we did not cut development, and we did not cut marketing. And so those were the 4 principles that guided our decisions as we made some cuts. Staffing still continues to be a concern for us, in that we still do have part-time head coaches, and when you want to provide the best possible experience for student athletes, if their coach has a full-time job, 9 to 5, and they can't find him or her during the day, that's a bit of a challenge, and they don't get the same experience as a student athlete who has a full-time coach working on campus. Athletics and compliance, we're 1 deep in those positions, and so in a time when compliance is a big hot topic, we have 1 full-time staff member in compliance and a staff member that's a head coach and working in academics too. Relevancy is a challenge that every mid-major institution faces, and people ask me, well, how do you stay relevant? Really, it's you have to compete at the highest level, and again, that takes finances to do, and so that's why we do the coaching contract buyouts, that's why we do the coaching guarantee games, so those are very, very important. Just a little bit of a recap about where we sit in the Horizon League in terms of budgets and our peers within the league. Big picture items. I told you, I stood here last year and talked about what we wanted to get done this past year, moving forward for this year, and this is something I hope you'll put on your calendars. Green Bay has been selected as the host this year for the Horizon League Women's Basketball Championship, March 8th through the 11th in Green Bay. You'll all get an invitation. We hope you'll be there. If you've never seen a game in the Crest Event Center, you can just talk to Regent Higgins. He was there for the semifinals last year, and I think I can say that you had a good time. And yeah, great. And so, but what you need to know is this is the first time Green Bay has been pre-selected to host. In the Horizon League, it has always gone to the #1 seed. Now, we normally win that #1 seed. However, when the season ends, you usually only have 3 days to turn around and put a tournament on for all 10 teams in the Horizon League. We put on such a great experience and have such a great product. In fact, the Green Bay women's basketball is the most successful women's basketball program in the state of Wisconsin. The most successful program in the entire state of Wisconsin, Division I, II, and III. And so we're proud of that. And so all the coaches in the Horizon League wanted to bring the tournament to Green Bay because we also have the greatest fan base. And whether or not it's a school's home court or not, running out of a tunnel in front of 3,500 screaming women's basketball fans, no matter what team they're rooting for, makes a big difference for the young women playing the game. We will continue to build men's basketball. We will be creative and strategic in who we are playing, in our scheduling, and the Horizon League is working on an aggressive distribution model based on the success of men's basketball. We're going to try to revisit our contract with Wisconsin-Madison men's basketball team, and that we would love to host them in Green Bay. Chancellor Blank's not here, I don't see, but we would love to host the men's Badger team in Green Bay. It is good for the state, it is good for the system, it is good for the students, and so we would love for them to come back. The institution is going through a new dining RFP, and we have a seat at that table in order to see if it can help provide better meal selection and times for our student athletes, and we'll continue to increase fundraising and grow our external revenue model. This time next year, I will be able to share with you our strategic plan that will be finished on May 1st of this year. I think you'll be impressed with what you're going to see. And then we will continue to grow the student-athlete experience. We're putting together a collaborative campus and community group, nutritionists, sports psychologists, folks working in community nonprofits, academic advisors, in order to build what I would call a high-performance team for the overall 100% development of a student-athlete. We will aid the institution and the university leadership group in the growth agenda for UW Green Bay. And then we will work to grow our engagement with former athletes. That's an area that's probably been lacking. And so we are going to reinstitute our Hall of Fame, create a letter winners support group, and then do a former athlete advisory committee where former athletes can come and mentor our current student athletes. I invite you to come to campus. I would love for you to meet our student athletes. We are looking forward as an institution and a department to hosting your group in April, and we will make sure that you get to meet some of our student athletes and our staff and see our beautiful campus. And I do want to thank you for caring enough about athletics and Division I athletics to allow us to tell our story, share our good news, and our challenges too. But I really want to thank you for this time and want to thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Ms. Gillespie. And I also want to thank you, Chancellor Miller. We are blessed in this state to have three such fine athletic directors at our three Division I schools. And I congratulate you on your first year. You've made the kinds of progress you talked about last year. Thank you very much. I actually had a dual role on my first year on the board. I was on the athletic board for Madison, and I understand the issues of GPA compliance and student welfare. Right. And having had a conversation with Chancellor Money last night about their GPA on their campus for their teams, and hearing this is excellent. This is what we want for our student athletes. So thank you very much. Thank you for an excellent report. I appreciate it. Now, moving on. Are there any communications, petitions, or memorials for the region? President Cross?
We would like to extend our sincere condolences to our UW Whitewater colleagues. I see Bev is not here right now. But on the recent and unexpected passing last month of Dean of Students Mary Beth Mackin. Mary Beth was a professional in the field of student services with nearly 30 years of experience on the Whitewater campus. She was a sought-after speaker on the subject of First Amendment and student rights. And she recently traveled to China to help universities there with their student disciplinary practices. She was highly respected, not only by her UW Whitewater and UW system peers, but by others around the nation and world. She was truly a higher education leader who worked diligently to serve all students, and she respected their dignity and rights. The work of a dean of students is complex and challenging. Mary Beth knew how difficult that job could be, and she also knew the deep satisfaction and joy of truly helping students, faculty, and staff through tough situations. So our condolences to her family, friends, and colleagues, and she will be greatly missed.
Let's have a moment of silence. Earlier today, I mentioned and welcomed the students expressing their concerns regarding Madison. Before we close, I want to acknowledge I wanted to acknowledge you, and I want to thank you for sharing your concerns. Obviously, we are also concerned about these issues. Please be assured we welcome your input and concerns. All of us, chancellors, faculty, staff, and students, seek to do a better job of serving all students, and in this particular, listening to voices of the underrepresented students at our campuses. Thank you very much for being here, and we